The little baby rejoiced at the first rays of the morning sun. He laughed and made funny sounds at the birds outside the window. His eyes shone with joy, and the smile never left his face. The baby had fun playing with toys, making funny sounds, and creating little fairy tale worlds. A young girl approached the crib where the baby lay and tenderly asked if the young master had woken up yet. The young man with her said that if he had said such a thing in the palace, they would have immediately arrested him for treason. The young man looked closely at the baby, and the lady continued to admire how charming he was. The lady asked if the young man wanted to hold him, and he awkwardly took the child in his arms. He was worried that it wouldn't be easy for him to control his powers, and he feared that he might somehow hold the child incorrectly. And the girl thought this was very possible. Yes, the main character ended up in a short story. Initially, it wasn't so easy to understand, and she was too admiring of the baby's angelic appearance in front of her. The protagonist was surprised that in the paradise she found herself in, everything was in the Western style. And incredibly, the angel lying in the crib had the same body temperature as a human. The maid entered the room and asked what had happened to the young master, and why he didn't move when you touched him. She soon left and warned Marie that she still needed to work and asked her to take care of Prince Briel. The protagonist had heard these names somewhere before and realized they were from the story she liked to read on her way to work. For the love of children, she decided to become a kindergarten teacher, so she remembered the names of almost all the children from movies and novels, and she was surprised if this wasn't the novel she had read just before her death. The main character understood that the story said this baby would soon be murdered. The girl was outraged. She had to be trapped in that role, and she was worried about having to return to her world. She hoped this girl would realize her body was possessed, and this would help her escape from here. And every morning, she looked forward to waking up at home again. But reality was cruel, and she was not destined to return there. And strangely enough, little Brielle pulled her out of the total darkness of sadness and despair. The girl had already begun to worry about what would happen to her when she left. And just with this thought, she got goosebumps on her back. She was sure it was impossible to do this, and she couldn't let this angel die under any circumstances. Perhaps she was sent to this world to save Brielle and the girl. When she was by his side, she felt very warm and pleasant emotions. That day, the main character realized the main purpose of her life. And in this story, after the time when Brielle was supposed to die passed, she stopped trying to return to her home world. As much as she didn't want her parents to see how she would grow up, they unfortunately died in an accident. So the Count, Brielle's uncle, adopted the baby. Being a nanny, she changed the original plot and saved the little prince, which also paved the way for her uncle's life, who in the story was terribly depressed by the death of his nephew. For the first time seeing her next to a Brielle, the Count thought he wanted to kill him if he hadn't come to his senses. And he said he was just exercising that would help the child deal with his body in the future, because soon he would need to move on his own. That day, the young man thought the girl was really in danger, but he was convinced that the girl was telling the truth. That day, she managed to gain the Count's trust, but her main task was to take care of the little prince. The Count swaggered into the palace, followed by his servants, walking with confident steps on the marble floors, surrounded by majestic architecture and precious decorations. The Count, like a true aristocrat, had a charisma and power that made everyone around him feel awe and respect. The girl politely asked him to wash his hands first and only then touch the child. All the young woman's actions were aimed at delighting and inspiring the child, creating bright and memorable moments of his childhood for him. The lady noticed that the Count found it very difficult to express his feelings, although he was quite handsome. But his experiences were normal, as he was raising a child for the first time. The girl invited them to play hide-and-seek, but the young man didn't even know what kind of game it was. She asked him to look more closely and started playing a fun game with the child, where she covered her face with her hands, only to open them again and say, "Boo." The young man was surprised that the girl really wanted him to do this too. But a few hours ago, a complaint had been sent to him. The Count relaxed a little and started playing with the child. The girl understood that nothing strange could happen, and above all, she wanted to protect the baby. While the nanny was playing with the baby, a girl approached her and said she wanted to play with her too. But there was an awkward moment, and little Abriel, whom the nanny accidentally let slip from her arms, almost fell to the floor. Little Ellie managed to lift the baby and was very afraid that the nanny might say bad words. But the nanny patted her on the head and gently told her that the floors here were very hard, so they could get hurt if they fell. This charming girl was Marie's sister and played an important role in the latter's acceptance into the Count's family as a nanny. Since Marie did not give birth, Brielle was cared for by a woman named Erin, but she could not take care of him full-time as she had her own child. In the original story, it was Marie who said she could trust no one but herself with the little heir. The girl thought she was hired as a nanny because of her status, but in reality, this was done because she had experience raising her brother and younger sister. But it turned out that Brielle didn't like Marie at all, and the baby cried constantly when she was near. However, just as the nanny was about to be replaced, their relationship suddenly improved. And this happened the day she woke up in Marie's body. They lived together in the Count's family. And sometimes, little Ellie also wanted to take care of the baby. The little baby was already crawling on the floor by himself, and the nanny, looking into his angelic eyes. She couldn't understand how he could be so sweet. 7-month-old Brielle couldn't even stand up a month ago, but now he can move his legs on his own. The baby grew up very fast. The Count hadn't seen him for several days due to being busy. And at the end of the year, he couldn't leave his office. And after finishing all his work, he immediately went to the baby's bedroom. That night, the butler informed him that the baby was already asleep and that he probably shouldn't disturb him. The young man was upset and probably wanted to see Brielle much more than the nanny expected. So he said the Count could enter and look at him quietly. Marie said he had become more active lately, and tomorrow the Count would be surprised how much the baby had changed. The young man wanted to stroke him, but the lady said his cold hands might wake him up. She noticed that in recent days the Count himself had lost weight, but this made him even more handsome. The girl asked the Count to speak more quietly and told him she would sing a lullaby to the baby now. But the young man didn't understand why he should sing a lullaby to a child who was already asleep. The girl began to sing a soft and quiet lullaby in a low voice, and even the Count heard how soft and deep her voice was. The next day, the young man put aside his work and decided to visit the baby in the morning. He admitted that during all this time, he had not been involved in his upbringing at all. But in reality, he had no one more valuable than his nephew, so he wanted to spend as much time as possible with him, regardless of his occupation. The nanny happily told him they were ready to show him something and slowly lowered the child to the floor. The baby sat alone on the floor, and the young man couldn't believe that only a little time had passed. And he already knew how to sit. The nanny wanted the baby to try the texture game that many children his age love. After much thought, Marie found a solution and decided to use seaweed in the game. As the baby grew, the Count began to spend more time in the mansion, and that day he returned to working from home. Marie suggested that after seeing how much Brielle had matured, the Count decided he couldn't miss such valuable moments with his nephew. Their interaction seemed quite cute to him, and he decided that perhaps playing with textures would help them get closer. So he invited the young man with her. The Count saw a bathtub full of water and seaweed scattered next to it. The nanny said this was meant for texture play and was very good for developing muscles and expressing emotions in a child. The Count didn't immediately understand what all this meant, and before the nanny put the child in the tub, he became noticeably nervous. The girl said the baby could play with the seaweed and bathe in the tub at the same time. And indeed, the little prince greatly enjoyed this activity. The young man stopped worrying and thought, since his little nephew likes it, this business really yields good results. They sat together near the tub and continued to watch little Abriel splash in the water and happily scattering wet seaweed. The baby splashed water, and the Count was already all wet from the splashes flying in different directions. The nanny hurried to give him a towel, but suddenly slipped on the wet floor and fell directly into the Count's arms. Maria was scared and confused and immediately started apologizing for accidentally falling on the young man. After swimming, everything around the tub was covered in water, and the green seaweed continued to fly in all directions. Then the nanny put the baby to bed, and she decided to continue with her chores. Little Eli approached her and asked what she was doing, and Marie said she was sewing toys. And she invited the girl to look at one of them. The girl asked if she was sewing toys for the young master, and the nanny said the bear was for him. And the bunny lying on her lap was for the girl. It was a bit bigger, so the nanny was going to dedicate a little more time to it. And she asked the baby to wait a little. The nanny smiled and thought that Ellie was quite old now, but sometimes she still seemed like a little girl. This behavior from Ellie reminded her how surprised she was when she first saw the house where they lived. It was a dilapidated shack, and instead of clothes, they wore rags, and there was no talk of toys. Marie used money. She earned from the Count to provide her siblings with better clothes and food, but they still couldn't dream of dolls. Of course, what shocked her the most was that while she was working, they were left completely alone at home. It was painful for Marie to look at them, so she asked the Count for a proposal if her brother and her younger sister could live with her in the servant quarters. But instead of a bed in the shared bedroom, he gave them an entire room on the same floor as Brielle. The girl was incredibly happy to be able to give these children at least something. And she continued to work responsibly every day. Marie finished sewing a new toy, and that morning she showed the young master the little bear she had sewn. The incredibly beautiful toy quickly caught the attention of the baby, who was crawling on the floor in front of them. The maid came to help the nanny change the baby's diaper, and that morning the two of them calmed him down. Brielle had lived for almost a year, and Marie really wanted to believe that everything would be fine for him. But sometimes, anxiety visited her even on the quietest days, and she didn't understand who ordered this baby's death. And for what purpose? That night, the Count found some free time, and together with the baby, read a very interesting fairy tale about dragons. She realized that the young master seemed to like dragons, and the girl noticed that reading the fairy tale clearly brought them closer. They started spending more time together after she recently had to leave for a while. Marie needed to bring some things. Brielle was shy with many people lately, so he refused to spend time with anyone else. However, the Count responded to, at the butler's request, agreed to sit with the baby. And Brielle had long since gotten used to him, so he immediately stopped crying. But there was an interesting point. Half an hour later, the Count regretted his decision, and the butler conveyed this information to him. The young man didn't understand how a 1-year-old child could be so fast, as he couldn't take his eyes off him for a second. The little baby kept throwing books around him while sitting at the library table. After a while, Marie ran back into the palace, who was very worried that something had happened, because they suddenly called her again. The Count said he thought the baby was sick. The young man recounted how he screamed, his eyes widened, and he probably got a fever. But it turned out the situation was different, and the baby liked the dragon in the book so much that the Count mistook his joy for illness. This incident led the Count to start reading him stories about dragons every night. Marie noticed that the young man seemed worried, but she just smiled and pretended not to notice his excitement. But then it became clear that the Count was even trembling with fear. The death of his older brother, his wife, and Brielle's parents was not described in detail in the novel. And it was only said that they died in an accident while traveling to the Count. If he had arrived a couple of minutes later, the baby would have died along with his parents. Marie suggested that this was why the Count was so worried about his nephew. And he was even worried about ordinary sneezes. She understood that apparently there was a huge wound in his heart, and the young man still couldn't get over that huge loss. That evening, one of the maids shouted at Marie to come quickly and help with the baby. The little prince was always quiet, but as soon as Marie walked away, the young master started crying. The girl rushed to the rescue, and as soon as the nanny approached the baby, he immediately calmed down, and she decided to quickly change his diaper and then promised him she would hold him in her arms again. But suddenly the baby said something, and the nanny thought it was his name. In fact, this was Brielle's first word, and it wasn't mom or dad, but the name Marie. Although it wasn't hers at all, only this baby could alleviate the suffering she experienced after coming to this world. The precious baby she managed to save was the only reason to keep living, and his first word was a gift. As if he knew how hard it was for her. That day, Marie was playing with the baby in his room when little Ellie approached her. The child paid no attention to the girl because he was interested in the toy. But little Ellie threw herself onto the bed and scattered all her blocks. She laughed and jokingly said she was very sorry that the young master's castle had collapsed. Marie laughed, it was obvious, and the little one did it on purpose. She brought a plate and offered him something to eat. It was a hot potato. Little Ellie immediately grabbed it and took it to the young master, offering him a bite. But the plate was hot, and the caring nanny said she would blow on the food. And the children could take it. She understood that little Ellie also wanted to be like her older sister. While everyone was having fun together, another child was standing outside the door. And he was clearly upset that they weren't playing with him. This child was Marie's younger brother, and his name was Bari. He entered the room and apologized to his sister for distracting her, but Marie smiled and invited him to play with the young master. The boy was very happy, took his ball, and promised they would definitely have fun. Little Ellie also wanted to play with the master, and the nanny decided she needed to bring drinks quickly and join them. The children greatly enjoyed playing with the baby, and Bari happily announced that he had brought a teddy bear. But Ellie said the young master was already used to her, so she was sure it would be much more interesting with her. Because she even cooled down the sweet potatoes for him. The confrontation between brother and sister continued, and they started fighting over who would play with the baby first. Marie entered the room and saw the little gentleman crawling towards her on the floor and calling her name loudly. The next day, the little prince had an important birthday, so the count, Marie, her brother, and her sister gathered at the festive table. It was Brielle's first birthday, and the count decided to celebrate his nephew's party at the mansion with his loved ones. Instead of a luxurious banquet, he organized a nutritious dinner especially for the baby. Kelly and Bari. Marie was sure that the count had made the right decision, and the young master would have been very uncomfortable among strangers. Today the baby smiled with his happiest smile, and the count said it was time to blow out the birthday cake candles. He invited the girl to blow out the candles together, and she was very surprised to hear such an offer. He asked her to come closer and started slowly counting to 3. Marie was surprised, thinking she felt excited to be close to him, and she was sure that the young master could now clearly feel his heart beating. The count counted to 3, and they loudly congratulated the little prince on his birthday. And the girl wished him to grow up healthy and happy. The birthday celebration was over, and Marie walked down the hall that night. And she felt how significant the day had been. In the original story, the baby did not live to see his first birthday, but this time he made it. And the girl was so moved and happy that she achieved the goal she set when entering this story. She dreamed that the baby would continue to grow up quietly, and that night she thought the count was still awake, and whether she should bring him a cup of coffee. That day, the count stood near his brother's portrait and bitterly lamented his loss. He looked at his image and felt how much he missed him. He was very worried about whether he could raise his son. In fact, he really wanted his brother to see the baby's smile with his own eyes. But unfortunately, this was not destined to come true. Marie accidentally saw the count standing near his brother's portrait, and now she understood why the young man decided to organize such a celebration. Of course, the little prince's safety was a priority, but she decided to slightly adjust the goals in her care diary for him, and add another point about the young master's happiness. The next day, little Ellie was very happy that this long-awaited day had finally arrived. Little Ellie loudly told the baby that today was the day the young master would finally learn to walk holding hands. The last time she tried to teach him, but it didn't work. Marie asked Ellie to be careful, because the young master learns fast. But he could still fall. Little Ellie asked if the young master was having fun, and if so, he was obliged to kiss her. The girl was happy that the children were playing happily among themselves and found them very cute. That night, she went to the Count's office and said she wanted to discuss something with him. The young man immediately got up from his seat and was worried that something had happened to the baby. But Marie calmed him down, and everything was fine for the young master. The girl thought it would be good to make friends of the same age as the baby, but she wasn't sure if aristocrats introduced their children. The Count said that usually children make friends at their parents' gatherings. But the girl thought about it because she hadn't met anyone. The story said that since childhood, the Count didn't like being in company and often ran away from all sorts of gatherings. And therefore, he had almost no acquaintances in high society, and among his closest friends, there were only 2 children. The young man said that one of his companions had a son the same age as Brielle, and he promised to talk to him. But suddenly, the Count asked the girl to stay for a while and handed her a small box. He said that Ellie mentioned that Marie bought a brooch, but she didn't wear it while taking care of the baby. And then it went out of style. This is the brooch Marie wore when she entered his body. The girl had to take it off, as any accessory can be dangerous for small children, and she thinks little Ellie remembered this. One day Ellie noticed how much her sister had changed. She and Bari always lacked love and attention, so they accepted these changes quite easily. The girl was very happy with this gift because this brooch meant a lot to her. The young man was worried that she wouldn't like the brooch and said he had chosen it himself. So perhaps it wasn't to her liking, and he couldn't be sure how good it was. But Marie lit up with happiness and said in a cheerful voice that this brooch was gorgeous. The next day, the Count put aside all his work, and while he was with the baby, he heard him call him uncle. Marie took the baby in her arms and affectionately told him they were choosing a book for the young master. And she asked if he would like to read about other animals, for example, about deer or tigers. Well, the child wanted to read about dragons again, but unfortunately, all the fairy tale books were finished. And Marie asked how good the Count was at drawing. They told another fantastic story about dragons again, and it was time for the baby to go to bed. They decided to put him to bed together, and the girl noticed that the young man was doing very well. The nanny was very happy that, compared to how things were when she first came to this world, the relationship between the Count and the baby began to improve. They put the little prince to bed, and as the lady turned around, she suddenly bumped into the young man. Her heart started beating faster because she was clinging to the young man. So Marie quickly moved away from him, because handsome men at night were very dangerous. The next day, the children were playing in the little prince's room, and little Ellie was trying to find out which of the rocking horses would win. They played with rocking horses, and the girl said the one with the red ribbon won. But a childish conflict arose again between brother and sister, and little Ellie declared that her brother should not dare to tease her master. The little prince suddenly approached Bari and silently hit his leg with his fist because he was shouting at his sister. The boy asked why the young master hit him because they were just playing. In fact, Bari only mildly scolded his sister, but the child rushed to defend her. The boy was not upset at all, but he asked again why the young master decided to hit him. While the children were playing, the nanny was busy with important matters. She finally finished drawing the cards that were supposed to help the young master remember the animals. Suddenly, the Count approached her from behind and asked if Marie was really drawing something. She said she was drawing an ant, but the young man laughed because he had never seen ants like that. And when he got the job, he asked the butler about the Count's grades during his studies and his ranking in the exams. The butler reported with admiration that the Count was first in all disciplines. The young man asked if he could take this card with a picture and said he would collect them as souvenirs and show them to the baby when he was older. He grabbed the card with the picture and raised his hand so the girl couldn't reach it. And the lady was indignant because it looked like a trap. The girl suddenly pressed against him. The young man was confused for a moment. In fact, her cunning plan was to snatch the drawing from the Count, which he didn't want to hand over. Marie held the baby in her arms and cheerfully told him that a new friend would come to see him today. She was sure the baby would be very happy to see a child his age and would have fun playing with him. The little prince's world should have become a little wider, because after entering society, life changes a lot. The guests had already arrived, and the Count called the nanny and the baby to introduce them to someone. It was Viscount Jake's son, a comrade of the Count, and the name of this mischievous child was Jadon. The children looked at each other with interest and greeted each other shyly. The Count said they would go talk and wished the children to have fun together. Marie knew that children of that age usually liked toys, so it would be easier for them to get along. But 10 minutes later, a loud cry was heard in his room, and the excited Count ran in. It turned out that Jadon liked the young master's favorite toy. And they managed to fight while choosing what to play with together. And that same toy bear ended up in the hands of a new friend. The nanny said she apologized sincerely. The little prince really liked this toy. But Jake replied that there was nothing wrong with it, and his own son took the toy without asking. The children never made up, and it seemed that the first attempt to make friends failed. And after meeting, the nanny was very worried that the children couldn't make friends. She understood that nothing terrible had happened. The little prince was growing up in love, care, and security, but one of the main problems had not yet been solved. When she woke up in this world, the money Marie received as the first payment for the little prince's murder was already under the bed. The girl carefully examined everything around her and found nothing suspicious. She was worried and didn't know what to do if this task had already been transferred to someone else. Well, suddenly the Count approached her and asked what was going on. He was surprised to see the nanny there and asked what had brought her here so late. She admitted that she wanted to discuss something with him. They went to the hall, and the Count said he had already selected knights for the young master. Marie understood that she couldn't tell the young man everything, but she could guide him slightly in the right direction. The young man asked if the lady had really come to him at that moment to discuss the topic. And she laughed and said she was very forgetful, so she was afraid of forgetting to discuss the topic. The Count said he had a couple of nights in mind, that he would have to hurry with this, and that he would like to take a Brielle for a short walk. The young man reported that the baby would be under the protection of the royal guard, so there was nothing to worry about. He decided to go on vacation as soon as possible, and he was sure he needed a short break after so many years of working. It had been a long time since the Count had met a person who was so sincerely concerned about him as Marie. And it was difficult for him to get used to it. On this sunny day, the children were splashing in the courtyard, and little Ellie was indignant because her brother wouldn't let her play with the young master, even though it was her turn. The children were playing outside, and suddenly the little prince's attention was drawn to a gardener watering the flowers. The children splashed in the water for more than an hour. Apparently, they liked it very much, so the nanny quietly waited for them with towels on the side. But suddenly the Count joined them, and the children were very happy to see him. The Count greeted the children with a smile on his face, revealing the world of his palace to them. His eyes shone with joy when he saw the children's happy smiles, and he tried to do everything possible to ensure the children were surrounded by care and attention, while his assistant begged the young man not to leave his service and not to go on vacation. The Count understood that the moments spent with the baby were priceless. The girl was surprised to hear his assistant tell him that if the young man went on vacation, everything would wither without him. And now she understood how necessary the Count's work in the palace was. The three of them went with the little prince on his first picnic, and the Count seemed very happy. He thought before that they talked about security, he took care of that, but it seems everything went well with Marie. Even without it. Little Brielle pointed to a path leading to the forest, but the lady did not know that area well. And she was afraid they would get lost, and the Count immediately offered to accompany them. The child ran happily ahead. The girl could barely keep up with him. And a few minutes later, they saw a fluffy gray rabbit on the path. Maria laughed because the little prince had been chasing the animal the whole time. But suddenly, a strange feeling overcame her, and she had a strong feeling that they were being watched at that moment. She immediately shouted loudly, and the Count instantly caught up with them. Maria held the baby in her arms and was very excited, and immediately told the Count that she had an unpleasant feeling that they were being watched. The young man said he would ask the knights to inspect the surroundings, and asked if everything was fine with the baby. The Count took him in his arms, and Marie affectionately told him that he would be born soon. After a while, the Count was informed that the knights had not found anything, and that there wasn't a single suspicious person in the park. In fact, they were very lucky that no one was there, but for some reason, Marie's soul was still very heavy. But the rabbit, which suddenly appeared on the path, appeared there for a reason, and a man was already sitting next to it, who was surprised how he could have let them escape. Time passed, and the little prince's second birthday arrived. This time, the Count decided to invite many nobles. Marie couldn't stop thinking about the day in the park when she felt someone was following them. But the lady decided that she was only imagining things, and nothing had happened since that day. Brielle crawled up to the nanny and started pulling her skirt. She smiled and thought that he was probably uncomfortable seeing so many unfamiliar faces. Suddenly, a handsome man approached her and told her that he had been looking for Marie for a long time. This man was Brielle's maternal grandfather. The man smiled cheerfully and congratulated the little prince on his birthday. The grandfather did not come empty-handed and decided to congratulate the baby by giving him a tender and beautiful dragon that the little prince loved so much. The child quickly took the toy, and the nanny asked him to thank his grandfather for the gift. He said that the nanny takes good care of the young master. And she said that the little prince is very modest and gentle, so it's not that difficult with him. Marie politely said they would leave for a while, and it seemed the young master wanted to put the new toy with the others. They went upstairs to his room, and the nanny was worried that the young master might be careless on the stairs. The little prince's grandfather saw that he was surrounded by such good people, so he was glad that the baby could grow up in peace. He remembered his daughter, Ira, and was sure that his son was living a glorious life. The next day, little Ellie loudly declared to the young master that he had to hurry before the sun set. Yesterday, they couldn't go down the slide because of the holiday, so the young lady suggested they climb to the very top and slide down the slide. She was very interested in the little prince and laughed that they would now develop unimaginable speed. The children had fun sliding down the slide, and it seemed the little prince really liked this idea. Little Ellie asked if the young master would like to take his lady bear for a ride, who had an impressive new dress. After a long walk, Marie and the Count sat at the same table, and she carefully fed the baby. The girl asked if the Count would like to try feeding Abril himself. The butler didn't like the idea. The young man said everything was fine and took the spoon in his hands. While the young man carefully fed the little prince, he asked Marie if she would be free tomorrow afternoon. She looked at him with her big, kind eyes and asked if something had happened to the knight. He put the spoon on the table and asked if she would like to have dinner together tomorrow. Marie was very surprised that the young man invited her to dinner together in such an atmosphere. Naturally, this was not a date invitation that the girl was thinking of, and, of course, the Count had dinner with the young master in mind. He looked at Marie and suddenly asked if the little prince looked quite chubby, and if he had really gained weight. In fact, the caring nanny simply dressed him warmly because it was cold today, and the baby was wearing about 6 layers of clothing. The young man said that the lady must not forget to take care of herself too, so as not to catch a cold and infect the baby. The nanny said she would immediately put on warm clothes, and she couldn't allow the young master to get sick. The young man thought this girl meant much more than just a nanny. They were left alone with the young master, waiting for Marie's return. That night they sat at the table. The young man said the nanny should eat quietly, and he would feed the child himself. Marie decided she could afford to relax for a while and ate the juicy piece of meat with appetite. But the girl was a little worried and thought about Ellie and Bari. The Count said they could take them, but he decided not to because of numerous rumors. Marie regretted it very much and promised herself that next time she would definitely take them with her and give them the best dinner of their lives. That night, they were sitting in one of the most famous and luxurious restaurants, and the Count had already attracted the attention of the guests. There was an opinion about the Count that this young man was very cruel and cold. After a hearty dinner, the three of them returned home, and the Count asked if it was too difficult for the girl. The nanny held the little gentleman in her arms the whole time, and the caring young man offered her a massage. She might hold a civilian post now, but in her service as a knight, she had to study basic medicine. The Count carefully kneaded the nanny's shoulders and said that almost all younger sons of the middle class join the knight orders. And he simply left it early. Marie shared her opinion that it was time for the young master to hire tutors. Marie and Brielle were in his room. Looking excitedly at the new plush toy his grandfather had given him for his birthday. There was a card on the floor with the same drawing of an ant that the nanny had drawn. And the little prince asked why all insects have 6 legs. The nanny understood that the baby had reached that curious age and therefore did not stop asking questions. She suggested asking the Count, and after half an hour of questions from the little gentleman, he turned noticeably pale. Marie told the baby that the teacher would come to see them today, and she really hoped the first lesson would go well. But suddenly, she heard loud crying coming from the baby's room. And she rushed to check what was happening there. The nanny rushed into the room and saw that the teacher was standing near the table. And a small knight was sitting on a chair next to him. She asked what was wrong, and the young man said he was trying to teach the child his notebook. Brielle's teacher was Sir Hugues, and he reported that the baby suddenly shouted, and he himself didn't understand what was wrong. 2 minutes earlier, the teacher suggested that the young master learn to spell his uncle's name. Since the child had trouble concentrating, the young man had to interest him in another activity. The child said Marie's name several times, and the teacher suggested that apparently this was the name of his nanny. And the young master probably just adores her, and she is probably a very good person. After the nanny didn't leave, the teacher thought this girl looked very cute. But after a couple of minutes, the baby started shouting loudly and refusing to do anything the teacher suggested. In fact, it would be difficult for Hugues and Marie to understand what really happened in the eyes of a small child. The girl suggested that the knight was probably scolded a little and was simply not used to doing something without her. The teacher was very worried that the young master probably didn't like some words. Maybe she just said something wrong. So the nanny quickly told him what the little master loves most. The weather outside was nice, and Marie watched from the balcony as her brother Barry played with the young master. She supposed the little prince liked playing with him because he was physically stronger than his little sister. Little Ellie ran up to them shouting cheerfully that it was time for them to come with her. Marie was happy to see that her sister was not angry now and was looking for a way to play together. So the little one happily announced that she wanted to show the children something. She held an incredibly beautiful flower crown in her hands, and the next minute she decorated the little gentleman's head with her ornaments. But her brother was sure that the young master had to appreciate her acting skills. The nanny watched the children closely and decided that she would have to find a game in which all 3 of them could play. And last time, their water game made even the Count smile. That day, the Count had a meeting scheduled with the king, who entered his office. He smiled and asked if he had at least eaten before work. The king said he had heard it would rain at night and invited the Count for a drink with him. But the young man was forced to refuse. He noticed that the Count had changed remarkably, and before he would have said he planned to work all night. The king said he heard that lately the Count had even started smiling. And this happened when he remembered a Brielle or his nanny. The king asked about the celebration of the baby's 3rd birthday and stated that he hoped he would be invited this time. The Count thought about it. He knew that wouldn't happen, but he still asked and tried to find out if he was going to make Brielle his successor. The king smiled and said, "It's very noticeable how much the Count loves his nephew. He even wonders what will happen when he has his own child." He also said that everyone was talking about how kind his nephew's nanny was, and the young man was indignant about who was spreading those rumors. He didn't even understand why he was so hurt by what someone said about Marie. but he tried to convince himself that if there were too many rumors, they could ruin his reputation. And he needed to focus on work. The caring nanny was busy with her daily chores, and while hanging the children's clothes, she noticed that the young gentleman had grown a lot. And he needed a new shirt. The lady suddenly heard a bird tapping on the window, but she couldn't open the windows for fear of getting hurt. But still, the girl was intrigued and decided to open the window, behind which it was raining heavily. It was only at that moment that she suddenly realized that the man who ordered Brielle's murder had also reached her. She felt someone's gaze on her, got goosebumps, and her hands trembled. The feeling in reality and in the book was completely different, and Marie continued to look into the distance. She clearly saw the silhouette of someone in the distance behind a tree and shouted loudly who was there. To understand what kind of person Marie was before this, we can recall the incident where little Ellie was left alone in the rain, having forgotten her keys at home. This happened on a rainy day when the little one forgot her keys at home and her sister. And her brother had to return late. The girl sat in the rain for a long time, but she didn't wait for her family to return. From the cold, Ellie closed her eyes, fell asleep, and woke up already lying in a warm bed. And dry. The adults near the crib whispered that there was a rumor that Marie abandoned Ellie and decided to take care of only Bari, because raising one child was much more useful. The little ones listened to them discuss how Marie took all their money and ran away. A few hours later, Marie returned home. She really was that person. She didn't care about the well-being of her younger brother and sister. She had nowhere to live. There wasn't enough money for anything. So she decided to abandon baby Ellie. The girl realized then that this was normal, and her sister hated her, simply because she was in the way. The children never went against Marie's will, and one day little Ellie, sitting at breakfast, said she was full, and Marie was indignant because the baby wasn't eating. Because it wasn't easy for her to get that food. The baby cried and said she couldn't eat anymore, but the persistent Marie ordered her to finish her meal, and not to get up from the table until she finished. Then she started fattening up the younger ones. When she found out the Count was looking for a nanny for his nephew, she was sure her well-fed appearance should work in her favor. Marie fell into debt, and when the lenders came after her soul, she simply ran away, leaving her sister behind. But she still needed to make a living. In the original story, a certain dark hand handed her a bag of silver coins when she had already become a nanny. And Marie was worried about whether this was really the person standing among the bushes. But she tried to convince herself that it just looked like him and that the Count had overly reliable security. The girl's head was filled with different thoughts. She didn't know what to do, but at that moment her little sister approached her. She asked what Marie was doing in the rain, and the young master was already bringing her a towel. The children began to wipe Marie's wet face, from which large raindrops were dripping. And that day, the girl realized that she was not actually alone, and that with them she had nothing to fear. Marie immediately ran to the Count to tell him she had seen a suspicious figure near the mansion. She reported that she couldn't see his face, but as soon as their eyes met, he disappeared. She really hoped the Count would believe her words, but she couldn't tell him what she knew from the novel. The Count said that in that case, she should increase his security. And the sooner he does it, the better it will be for everyone for the sake of everyone's safety. She was very happy that, for some reason, the young man always listened to her and never asked unnecessary questions. And the girl was grateful to him for such trust. The young man looked thoughtful. The lady noticed and asked him why he had such a pensive expression on his face. In fact, the words the king told him could not leave the young man's head. And he couldn't even tell Marie, and he didn't even understand why he felt this way. The next day, the young gentleman was sitting at the table as usual. But today, he was very nervous, and Marie couldn't understand what was happening. She thought the young master would become less capricious as he grew up. But the time had already come when the young gentleman needed to study table etiquette. The baby grew up quickly, and the girl thought that someday he wouldn't need her anymore, and she would have to leave her nanny position. However, she felt that she would like to take care of such a cute baby for as long as possible. Brielle kept throwing tantrums every day, and the nanny went to see the Count to inform him that the baby had been behaving very strangely lately. She realized that in any other situation, he would have panicked. But the young man remained thoughtful and silent. He suggested that it might just be a pretty protest and that everything would be temporary. Little Brielle approached him and suddenly told him that the Count could not marry before growing up. A few hours earlier, the little gentleman and his new friend were drawing in their cozy and lovely room. The nanny approached them and found those cards with insects that the Count had drawn. She looked at the drawing and once again admired the artwork. Sometimes it seemed to her that her uncle could do absolutely anything. The little gentleman looked at the beautiful drawing and thought that he wanted to be like his uncle when he grew up. His new little friend stated that his uncle was also struggling with something, and that was love. He said that his father said his uncle was good at work, but didn't understand relationships at all. If his uncle found a wife, then the nanny would have to leave, and the gentleman would burst into tears because he couldn't lose Marie. Naboryatsky overheard the children's conversation and relayed it to the Count, so he promised the boy not to marry. But the young man began to think, for some reason after these words about his beloved. The only one who came to his mind was Marie. Then the Count told her the reason for these scandals, and the girl really hoped that everything would be resolved, since the young master no longer suited them. The Count even hired guards for a walk in honor of Eli's birthday, and promised to form a full order for the little gentleman. But the girl was still worried about many things. The main threat had not disappeared. And on that rainy and cloudy day, she probably saw the man who ordered Brielle's assassination. When she entered Marie's body and stopped killing, a parallel story about this criminal appeared. She still didn't know who wanted to kill the young master. She was standing near the window when she saw this man again, and she was very afraid that he was here again. The name of this young man was Derek, and he was the owner of the most expensive and longest sword in the kingdom. In the original story, he was a loyal subordinate of Kentrell, the main villain, a ruthless target who stands in his way. But he was back in the capital, and the girl felt that her story should have changed because the young master did not die. Marie became very nervous and asked the baby to return to the mansion with her. That night, Derek was in front of the Count's office, with whom he had an agreement to meet. The young man asked him to sit down and told him he would get straight to the point. He informed him that she invited him here because she learned that his brother's death was not an accident. On the young master's birthday, the Count stood near his brother's portrait and told him that Brielle's grandfather had come today and that his wife would surely be happy to see that her father was well. He stood near his portrait for a long time and clearly felt that there was something strange about his death. This could be dangerous, so he decided to call Derek and question him in detail. He asked him a very important question and wondered if he would be on his side until the end. Derek knelt on one knee and said that in the most difficult moments of his life, only the Count was with him. And whose side should he be on if not his? Brielle's third birthday was much more luxurious than the previous one. The Count invited all the most influential people in and around the capital. And he also helped with the birthday of Ellie, who was his nephew's best friend. There were many nobles at the festival, and this meant that many rumors could arise there. Everyone commented that the Count was raising his eldest son's child, and it was rumored that his father had died in an accident. Marie was preparing the baby for the festive ceremony and arranging the festive bow on his beautiful suit. The Count entered her room and asked the nanny to accompany him. The lady thought he had reacted too violently to her proposal and was very happy. But she still believed that they should go along with the gentleman. The child was very eager to see Marie by his side, but she promised him she would go with him next time. She couldn't appear in high society with her nanny on such an important day, and the guests were informed that the Count of Cantrell and his nephew Brielle were appearing in public. All the guests admired how cute the baby was, as he was already so handsome from his early years. Just like his father. The Count shook the young master's hand, and he looked at him fearfully seeing so many guests. Marie watched them from the second floor, and at that moment, she realized that she had really come to this world to save the baby. And she liked it very much. The girl did not attend the celebration, and that night she sat alone on the stairs near the palace. Suddenly the Count approached her and asked why she was dressed so lightly. Because it was quite cold outside. He said that the young master was already asleep, and after greeting the guests, he immediately ran to his room to play with Haddon. She suddenly remembered how the Count changed in the novel after Brielle's death. She cried a lot and had an incredible thirst for revenge for the baby's death. She unexpectedly told him that they could protect him in any way. The young man was surprised by such words. He confirmed that they would do everything possible to ensure that everything was fine with little Brielle. He thanked the girl for everything she does, and Marie returned his sweet smile. He didn't even know if he could have done it so well without her and her strength. He really hoped that someday he could express his feelings for Marie. The next day, a dark-haired lady came to visit Kentril. She heard that His Majesty loves luxury, but today only 2 maids were present with her. She was really trying to pretend that this was enough for her. He greeted her and called her queen, suggesting that she was still worried about how she would appear in the eyes of her subjects. She called him by his name, and the young man said he understood that they had a close enough relationship, and asked not to address him that way again. The lady replied that everyone already knows everything, and any other address for him would seem much stranger. Although they were relatives, they could not see each other more than once a year. The lady asked how the young master was. The lady said she had no news about children and asked when the Count was getting married. The next day, the young master called Marie to show her something. He wanted to say that his new friend had lost again, but Marie laughed and said they were both great. The one who benefited most from the young master's fencing lessons was Barry, which could give him the opportunity to become Brielle's knight in the future. The lady handed a glass of cold lemonade to the young man who was practicing fencing with his brother. And the young master. Brielle's fencing master's name was Taylor. He was born a commoner and was a brilliant swordsman. He thanked the girl for the lemonade. She returned his smile and said he should thank her for teaching her brother. The young man said that this training was not a burden for him, because his younger brother tried very hard. In addition to fencing, the young gentleman should have learned to ride a horse. This turned out to be extremely difficult for him. The young master was very scared, and the Count told him that once he had ridden a tall horse, he would never be afraid of a short one, and thus learning to ride a horse would be faster. The little gentleman cried because he was afraid to sit so high, and in this case, Kentril decided to travel with him. The baby calmed down a lot with his uncle. After a few minutes, he shouted happily to Marie to see how he was sitting on the horse. At that moment, the Count remembered that his older brother had once told him these words, who also taught him to ride a horse. One of the horses approached Marie and began to gently sniff her hair. The man nearby laughed and said, "It seems the horse likes the lady, and usually this horse is not very friendly." The lady had never ridden a horse before, and a young man approached her and offered to help her. He said that this horse was named Dan. He usually didn't like carrying anyone very much. He had an excellent pedigree, and no one had ever been able to stop him. The lady asked if she could try, and the gentleman replied that the Count himself was already training the young master. He can be distracted and help the girl. In her past life, she never had the opportunity to ride a horse due to the rain. There were no horse rides that day, so Marie decided not to miss this opportunity. She thought that Brielle would also have fun if he were on horseback with them. The gentleman apologized and helped the girl get on the horse, which was very tall. This young man seemed very kind and sweet, and was happy to help Marie. The little gentleman was very eager for Marie to ride with them too. The opportunity to teach the nanny to ride a horse was a good idea. The young man thought about it. It might be quite useful, but his thoughts were interrupted by the baby's loud crying. He saw the gentleman helping the lady onto the horse, and Marie said she just wanted to try riding. The child shouted that they shouldn't touch the nanny without his permission, and said that when he grows up, she would definitely marry him, which the Count clearly did not expect to hear. The next day, the young man was busy with work. The butler approached him to inform him that news had arrived. Derek settled in the capital. He took out his brother's diary and read the lines about how, on Briel's birthday, he was indescribably grateful to heaven and his wife for trying so hard to give him life. And the whole family prayed for the baby, and words could not express how much he loved them. He reread his diary very often. He still couldn't believe how he could die leaving only this child. At that moment, Marie knocked on his door and asked him to look at something interesting. She held a plate of aromatic cookies in her hands and told how she and the young gentleman specially prepared them for Count Koma. And the child urgently asked to show him what they had made. The young man noticed that the young master was old enough to create something like this. Watching the young master grow was the most desired reward and the bitterest sorrow. And it seemed that all he had to do was blink, and he would be ready to leave this house and grow into a mature young man. Marie recalled this simultaneously bitter and joyful feeling of children growing up since the time she worked as a kindergarten teacher. As sad as it was, all children grow up. She put a sweet cookie in his mouth and laughed at the expression of surprise on Kentrell's face. Marie understood that children grow up very quickly and suggested that the Count spend more time with the baby and tell him more often that he loves him. She smiled cheerfully, holding sugar cookies in her hands, and the Count sincerely said that the cookies were very tasty. The nanny noticed that the young man's face was burning and asked if he had a fever. She was worried if he was getting enough sleep, because in the last few days she hadn't seen him outside the office. And suddenly, the Count slumped with his head resting on her shoulder. The nanny was very scared, and the little gentleman was very worried about whether everything would be all right with his uncle. The butler said he just needed to rest for a couple of days and sleep more, so there was nothing to worry about. This had never happened before in the Count's family. He was working day and night when he suddenly caught a cold, and Marie tried to remain calm to avoid unnecessary worries from Brielle. She told the baby he could get infected. She asked him to go play with the children, but the baby was very eager to stay with his uncle. She asked him to show his uncle how strong he was, and promised to stay with him while the baby was very worried and crying. The Count had a high fever all night, and only in the morning did he regain some sense while Marie told him that the young master was very worried about him. She brought him chicken soup and really hoped the Count would get better soon. He admitted that he was very grateful to the girl and that she had been by the young master's side the whole time. The girl smiled and thought it would be interesting how he would laugh if he saw how clumsy she once was with children. Marie said she had been very careful these days, and the Count replied that he didn't like it much. He looked at her and admitted that he wanted Marie to feel comfortable with him. It was very difficult for the Count to talk about his feelings, and he said that they were a family now. So the girl should be comfortable. She seemed to have become almost as close to the Count as Abriel was, and she would never have thought she would hear something like this from him. She was ready to cry if she knew the Count was so gentle. She wouldn't have cursed at him so much when reading the novel. Fans of the main characters often criticize him for the role he plays. And she was no exception. And she couldn't even imagine how she would behave if she found herself in the situation of the Count from the original story. The girl asked if anyone held a grudge against the Count, and this question was too sudden. He said he didn't remember anyone treating him that way. He answered so quickly that it was hard to believe. She didn't ask any more unnecessary questions and left the young man resting in the bedroom. And he thought about her for a long time. And perhaps there are those who still felt offended by him from the moment he became prime minister. He wondered if anyone had a serious fight with his brother, but he had no enemies. Unless someone wanted revenge on his parents. The next day, the young gentleman ran to his uncle with shouts of joy. He was very happy that he had finally recovered. He gave him some sweets and told him that it was a gift for his dear uncle, who had to drink a bitter medicine that no one likes. An excited nanny ran to them and asked the young master not to run away like that again. Kentrell asked if the nanny had told Abriel about her complaints. The young man said he wanted to ask the nanny something and invited her into the room. He was going to ask about this personally, but he was interested in Marie's opinion. Because she was his older sister, the Count admitted that the ceiling for developing his abilities here was quite low. He offered to send his brother to the academy, and the girl understood that for a member of a fallen noble family. The opportunity couldn't be better. Due to high education costs, even wealthy families only send their eldest sons to the academy. She heard that relationships with knights who graduated from the academy are not at all the same as the rest. Marie replied that this would definitely open up many opportunities for her brother, but that she couldn't ask for that because the young man had already done so much for them. Taylor said they were great with the sword. If their skills were already so good, then with the right polishing they would simply shine. And Bari would be very useful to the Count's family if he grew up and became a great knight. The young man had said these words once and repeated them again. That they were all a family, and these words were very important to Marie. She knew that no one would be safe until they found out who ordered the baby's murder. And it would be good if Bari could defend himself. Marie wanted her brother to be happy in the future and have a worthy job. So she confidently said that she would really like him to enter the academy. Marie's relatives were immersed in sadness that Bari was leaving for the academy. But everyone in the mansion congratulated him well. But there was one person in this mansion who had more to say about Bari's departure. And it was a young master who sat on the street and looked sadly at one spot, unwilling to talk to Bari, who came to say goodbye to him before leaving. The child tried to cheer up the young master and asked why he was so nervous. The child sat on the grass, and tears ran down his cheeks from the worry that his friend would soon leave this house. The child asked the young master if he was upset that he would soon go to the academy. In fact, the baby was really very upset, and Bari understood him very well, and besides, he didn't want to part with him. So he hugged the young master tightly and told him not to be angry because he would be back soon. The child was very upset because if his brother left, he would have to practice fencing alone. And he would have no one to practice with, and most importantly, no one would carry him in his arms anymore. Well, the young man perfectly understood that he could not refuse such an offer, but Brielle called him so sweetly Nanny's relative brother. Bari happily informed him that when he returned, as an exceptional knight, the baby would definitely become his master, and Brielle is already kind enough and sweet enough to become an outstanding ruler. They couldn't part for a long time. They held hands, and the baby promised that he would definitely become someone his brother could be proud of, and that he would quickly become a great knight and return to them. Then they left for the academy. Marie didn't have time to really say goodbye to her brother, or after his departure, she was left completely alone. Marie perfectly understood that the girl was sad after her brother left. So the next day, she invited her for a walk together. Her sister happily reported that the whole city is now celebrating His Majesty's birthday. On this day, all the shops in the kingdom decorate their doors with flowers, and in the evening, musicians go out into the street. And security in the capital is being increased for this period, so they can walk together safely while the young master sleeps. Marie and her beloved sister went to celebrate City Day and decided that she definitely had to treat the girl to some delicacies. Ellie was beaming with happiness on this holiday. Her eyes shone with joy, and a smile never left her face. It seemed like she was experiencing real magic surrounding her atmosphere of joy and fun. Holidays are a special time when you can forget about everyday worries and simply enjoy every moment. And that day, Marie and Ellie were completely immersed in a world of fun and joy, feeling incredible happiness from being part of this holiday magic. Suddenly, a young man approached Marie and saw the teacher next to her, who said he was very happy to see her. It had been a long time since they had seen each other. The young man said that lately he had been very busy with his students, so he had a lot of work and almost no free time. The baby stared at the unknown young man, and Marie assured him that this was Brielle's teacher. The young man smiled at the little lady and asked if this beautiful princess was really Marie's younger sister. They decided they wanted to drink orange juice, and little Ellie happily supported this idea. Each took a glass, and the young man said that lately he planned to focus on his management exams. Even at such a young age, little Ellie already understood that her sister also needed to communicate with other people. But for her, the Count was still the coolest. Then the girl said she was going to the bathroom, and the young man noticed that the girl was very energetic. Unlike the quiet Marie, Ellie was a very active and lively girl. You just said that, unfortunately, he was the only son in the family, and when he saw such friendly families, he even got a little jealous and secretly said that he sometimes sees an angry younger brother in Brielle. The teacher admitted that Brielle listens attentively in class, but if you ask him about Marie, he immediately starts spinning around and getting angry. Ellie was very happy that her sister was finally happy and had someone to take care of her. That is the Count. The Count, as was his custom, sat and worked in his office, and his only thought was that a special day would soon arrive. This day meant the king's birthday, and on that day, Brielle's first visit to the royal palace would take place. Together with the Count, they happily contemplated the young gentleman's festive suit, and joked that he was incredibly handsome, even more beautiful than the Count himself. Marie paid attention to Kentrell's appearance and noticed with admiration that today he was much more handsome than usual. The lady joked that the Count couldn't even compare to the splendor of the young master. Happiness shone in the children's eyes, and he happily ran to the Count to see what a beautiful suit he had. The young man picked him up and said with a sincere and incredible smile that the young master looked simply great today. Marie was sure that she and the young gentleman were learning high society etiquette, and that he would definitely succeed. Guests arrived little by little at the royal palace, and every minute the festive atmosphere became more and more magnificent. The Count and the young master were ready to appear on this very special day for everyone. As soon as the young man appeared in the hall, he immediately attracted the attention of many girls, and they all said how handsome this young man was. The Count was never unattended at such ceremonial events. Suddenly, a young man approached him and greeted him. This was Jadon's father, the very boy with whom the young master immediately managed to become friends. The children met again, and from that moment their relationship became friendly. A lady approached the children and brought her daughter so they could all play together. The Count's son was at such an event for the first time, and everyone expected the young gentleman to quickly make friends with everyone. An unknown lady invited Brielle to dance with a baby, but the Count was against adults imposing games on their children, having only selfish goals behind him, because Brielle would soon become a respectable knight. The young man offered the Count a drink and told him that the capital had not changed at all. It was very difficult for the Count to be at such events, so he hated socializing. The people here didn't care at all about the well-being of children and used them for their own benefit. The Count only planned to show himself and Brielle to the world and then return quickly. But naturally, he attracted the attention of the king, who said he was very eager for the Count to arrive with the baby. The baby stood in front of the king and looked at him with surprised eyes. While His Highness admired the polite child standing before him, the Count observed that the young gentleman was very capable and learns everything quickly. The king paid attention to the young gentleman, who stood up and smiled sweetly. So he asked the child to come closer to him. The little one took a step towards the stranger, who was sitting on a throne in a fur coat. But the king suddenly took him in his arms in front of all Soviet society, and didn't even ask the Count if he could afford it. The Count could not stand such brazen behavior from the king. He approached him and took Brielle in his arms. The fact that a king, who has no brothers and heir, treated a nobleman's son this way was far from controversial, especially when that child was a distant relative of the queen. Such an incident could cause concern among the nobles, and the Count didn't need it at all. The angry Count left the palace without even saying goodbye to the king, and as a result, he refused to work and instead went with the young master, Marie, and little Ellie to walk and have fun with his family. She, a stranger, saw them on the street and couldn't help but say how nice this young family was. The lady meant that this was not at all what she thought, but the young man stopped her. and told her that everything was true. The young master was sitting on his beloved uncle's shoulders and unexpectedly called out loudly to Marie. His mother. The woman was very kind to them and offered to give extra fragrant, freshly baked bread for free just because. Marie was very happy to see the kind and friendly woman, and first of all, gave the young master a taste of the delicious bread. The next day, the Count was informed that the young master had received an invitation. The butler asked the young man if he would like to go and said he was just worried about the master. The butler asked if the Count really had no intention of going to work on the appointed day. He said he wanted to think. And although he had the opportunity to enjoy the rest, even though the Count had a lot of work related to managing the house, he still had free time. He asked how Brielle was and then what the nanny was doing. The butler noticed that lately the Count asked about her more and more often. The Count said that he would also like to get some fresh air and sit reading the newspaper outside his office. He went out into the courtyard and saw that Marie was sitting on the porch and dozing again. The young man saw this and asked the butler to quickly bring a warm blanket. When Marie woke up, she saw that she had fallen asleep at the table. She had a soft pillow under her face, and she herself was wrapped in a warm blanket. The lady woke up and suddenly heard some sounds coming from behind the door. She saw the butler in the hallway and asked him if he knew who had covered her with a blanket so carefully. The butler said that His Excellency asked the maids to bring a blanket and a pillow so that the girl would feel comfortable. Marie was very happy and said that such pleasant attention even embarrassed her a little. And the butler said that he would also like to thank the girl for her kind heart and sincere. After all, thanks to her, His Excellency and the young master began to smile much more and enjoy the simple, happy moments of life. And if you think about it this way, it was the butler who always gave the girl strength with his timely words. On this magical day, the young gentleman was near the wall, counting out loud, playing hide and seek. It took many people to play, so Brielle asked the maids to play with him. Fortunately, everyone agreed, and little Ellie happily ran to play. Marie pretended to be playing, but her attention was drawn to the large number of books in the library. She saw that the volumes were messy and wanted to reach the book on the high shelf to tidy it up. Well, suddenly the girl staggered, and the Count, who was passing by her at that moment, appeared in time again. He said that the lady did not greet him, so it even seemed to him that she was deliberately ignoring him. But in reality, it turned out that she simply didn't notice him, and he had absolutely no reason to ignore him. The Count asked where she was going. The girl said that she and the young man were playing hide and seek, that she was interested in a book. The young man was happy to be with Marie, and suddenly thought about how nice she was. The Count was surprised, thinking that he often thought of Nanny Marie, but he couldn't contain his feelings when he saw her happy smile. She said she hid deliberately so she could be found easily. Since the young master hadn't come yet, she should probably look for him herself. And he would definitely like this game. Suddenly, a loud sound of breaking glass was heard throughout the room. And the young man, who had a skillful reaction, managed to cover Marie with himself. Marie, frightened, could barely breathe and didn't understand at all what had just happened. The Count covered Marie with himself, and she saw how he couldn't take his eyes off the window that had just broken. The girl saw blood on Kentrell's face. She got very scared and pressed against the young man. At that moment, the Duke ran into the hall, who heard a loud roar, asked what had happened. And the Count asked the man to urgently take the nanny to a safe place. The young man also ordered to immediately close all hallways and exits and be very attentive. After a while, Marie was informed that she could return to her room. And they warned her that only trusted people were left in the building. The young man saw that the girl was very worried and asked her to stay in the room with Ellie. Just in case, as soon as the situation stabilized, he would immediately come to her to tell her what was happening. Marie was very worried because of her. Not only Brielle was in danger, but also the Count. And everything would have happened differently if she had read part of the original about the culprit of everything that was happening. The children quietly opened the door and asked if everything was all right with their sister. and if anything had happened. But the children immediately noticed that Mary seemed quite tense, and everyone in the mansion was behaving very strangely. Look, she tried to calm the children, smiled, and in a soft voice told them that everything was fine, and that they shouldn't worry. In fact, now was not the right time to worry. The girl should have focused on what she could influence. As long as she felt the warmth of the children by her side, she had nothing to fear. But even after 2 days, the criminal who attacked Marie could not be caught. The baby was greeted in the mansion hallway by Master Yuges, who politely greeted her while she was sleeping. The little one saw him and wondered if Brielle really had something to do today. The young man said he was not used to seeing chaos here and asked if something had happened. The little one replied that neither the count nor the sister said anything, and the master asked where Mrs. Marie was. And he would like to greet her, otherwise he won't be able to come so often in the future. The young master ran to the master, showed him a sheet of paper on which something was written, and threateningly declared that he didn't understand anything at all. After talking with the teacher, Eli went to the count's office and knocked on the door. The count came out and asked if something had happened to the girl. The girl looked at the count embarrassed and admitted that she really wanted to tell him something. The young man asked if the young lady was afraid of something or saw strange people. Ellie said that in the garden behind the mansion there is a small pond. He was there. The count replied that the mansion is rebuilt every year and is always guarded so that any stranger is caught. Kentrey gave the girl a delicious sweet, and she continued her story that the one she saw was security. She saw him when she was playing hide-and-seek with the young man and the master. So she thought he was coming out like that because he was a knight and was very kind to her. In fact, this gentleman was the count, and it was the day they first arrived at his mansion. The little lady said out loud, "The good gentleman treats me very well, that's why I want to help him." Eli really hoped that this could help the count. That was all she could do for him. The young man patted the little girl's head and told her that the young lady was very brave, and she had helped him a lot. All this time, the count thought that the arrow that broke the window was aimed at him. But it was clearly intended for Marie, but he couldn't understand why an innocent girl, for some reason, was now in danger, and there was probably something he didn't know. Although he had countless questions, at least the girl he saw was Marie, and she would never hurt Abril. He stood near the window and watched the children play happily among themselves in the courtyard. And he remembered Marie's words, how she promised to protect the children together so that their smiles would always shine. It was a beautiful sunny day outside, and Marie and the count were sitting on a bench on the palace grounds. The girl asked what the young man had in mind during their last conversation. He said that with Ellie's help, they caught the criminal. It turned out to be a knight. He was interrogated in the dungeon, but as expected, he admitted nothing. According to the count, the girl was very attentive and immediately realized that something strange was happening. Marie knew very well that children are always much smarter than they seem. The count saw that the girl was very worried, so he didn't ask unnecessary questions, and gave her time to come to her senses. Last night, he called Derek to his house, told him that they were trying to kill the nanny for some reason, and noticed that there was definitely something suspicious here. He asked, the last time the young man asked him the same thing, could something really offend him? Previously, he asked how Brielle's guard was with her, since there was a criminal among the knights. He couldn't entrust the young master to just anyone, and therefore assigned Taylor to him. The young man thought, for some reason, Marina wanted to talk about why they wanted to kill her. He thought they were close, or simply unaware of the whole situation. The count said that if he knew the girl was in danger, he would definitely be attentive to her. The young man was sure that he was willing to do everything possible to ensure that Nanny Marie and the children were completely safe. He said that little Ellie was also very worried and asked Marie to see her. The girl thanked the young man and expressed great gratitude for being so kind to her. Marie went to Ellie's room and saw a frightened girl sitting near the bed, hugging her bunny. The suspicious man, who came in and out through the legal lagoon, often took care of Ellie and Bari before they moved to the count, and every time Marie was late home from work. He was with them, and she entrusted the children to him. And she didn't understand why the young man didn't touch Abril all this time when they were alone with him. She approached the baby, hugged her, and asked her forgiveness for dedicating so little time to her. Marie understood that when she first came to this world, she was completely crazy. But the little one happily declared that her sister was doing a very good job, preparing delicacies every day and carefully tying up her hair, buying new clothes, taking care of her, sending letters to her brother. But the girl understood that these were her direct responsibilities. In the original story, Ellie could not be happy because she was the sister of a criminal. At first, Marie only thought about protecting Brielle, but now she was incredibly happy to be able to help Ellie and Bari. Marie carefully hugged her sister and whispered that no one would dare harm them. But for this, she had to tell the Count her story and the whole truth, and Marie was very afraid whether he would believe her or hate her. As a child, little Kentril spent a lot of time with his beloved older brother. And on those days when they were together, the boy was always happy. He remembered the happy moments they spent together and realized that they really missed their brother. The Count woke up, and the first thing he saw was Brielle's cheerful face. The boy held out his hands to him and asked if something had happened to his uncle. The Count patted his cheeks affectionately and said he just missed his Brielle. The boy laughed and said that this meant he just needed to see him. The Count realized that the young gentleman was growing into a good man and kind, who would achieve great success in the future. After that incident, the Count wondered how he could help everyone cope with the tense situation. Marine could have let the children out due to the threat of danger, so Kent Errol decided to at least entertain them. Stop them. The young man played a wonderful melody for them on the piano, and the children were very happy that the Count could play too. Marie also smiled with happiness after his musical performance and applauded cheerfully. When Marie worked as a kindergarten teacher, she learned several songs out of pure interest. But here there was a piano, a high-end instrument, if she said she knew how to play. It would seem very strange. It seemed to Marie that a second ago Eli seemed quite excited, and she paid attention to him. The Count told the children that he would be happy to teach them to play, and they enthusiastically sat down to play the musical instrument. That night, the Count was supposed to have an important meeting. He and his knights went to see a person. The Count was informed that, as he had guessed, when his brother and wife died. There were people who received the greatest benefit, but it was still too early to assume that he was behind everything. Derek reported that the one they caught hadn't even opened it. He didn't think there was any point in threatening him. The young man reported that they had found a letter in his house. Due to the code, it was impossible to say exactly what it said. But thanks to the report, everyone was sure of his connection to what happened. The Count warned that he felt sorry, but upon returning to the mansion, he would again have to hand this matter over to his comrade. The young man asked if the Count had thought about his words, about whether the nanny could be trusted. The Count replied that it was possible, but Derek warned that since he hadn't known her for that long, if he wants to change the outcome of events, he can pressure her. Kentrell stated that he himself knows what to worry about. If the nanny wanted to get away with it, she would have harmed Brielle a long time ago. He was sure that the girl with sincere care and a good heart would take care of the young master just like him. And there was no doubt about her. The Count said there was nothing suspicious, but she really wasn't behind all this. And he even wonders how much he wants to protect Abril. And in summary, if something happens to her, then he definitely has to take care of them. Today was a special day for his sister's little Ellie, because her dear brother would come to visit them. The long-awaited vacation started today, and the girl asked the little one not to fight or argue under any circumstances, because the boy would come with his good friends. Marina couldn't believe that her baby Bari had grown up so fast and was already coming with his older friends. Children love to play with new people, and for little Ellie, new acquaintances should have been good for her. Finally, her dear brother got off the train, along with his friend named Zig Keeler. Well, in an instant Marie's face changed from calm to incredibly excited. And she realized that the main character of the original story was right in front of her. He had blonde hair that shone like threads in the sun and a divine beauty. And Ziegkieler was the main character of the novel. Well, there was also another dark side to him. He was the murderer of Kentril. His friend cheerfully recounted all his success and that he had already achieved 3rd place in the fencing competition. And just by looking at his calloused hand, the Count realized that he was an unusual person. He was Bari's friend, had a good character, but for some reason the nanny was suspicious. Recently, the kingdom adopted an absolute monarchy. There were many more noble families, many of whom were still completely unknown. Rod Keller was one of those people. The girl was worried about the new guest and asked if he would like something to drink after such a difficult journey. She didn't imagine that she could become friends with Bari in the original story. Her brother died very early, without even having a sword in his hands. He thanked the girl for the gift. He asked where the Count was now and said it would take him a long time. He just wanted to thank her for the invitation. Well, the lady happily said that the children were probably both tired. And before that they definitely needed to eat and rest a little. That day, the young master stayed alone in the courtyard, thinking about how tired he was of everyone. He was very upset that they went to receive the new guest without him, but suddenly he heard a familiar voice. The baby hugged his teddy bear and cried because he would really like to play with Bari. He was upset because his brother had already grown up, and he would also like to grow up so much as soon as possible. He was very worried that everyone was hiding something from him, and the knight warned Marie that the young master was very angry today. The young master frowned in a very funny way and closed his eyes so that no one would know he was angry. Marie sat down next to him and asked why the young master was there all alone. She was surprised how he got there, and the nanny told her that when she was a child, she also used to climb trees. She said that a stranger had come to them and that they needed to get to know each other gradually. Well, the baby remained in a bad mood, didn't want to listen to anything, and the nanny just smiled at how cute he was when he was in a bad mood. But suddenly, the girl couldn't resist and fell from the viewpoint where they were sitting. During the fall, she closed her eyes, but for some reason she didn't feel any pain from the fall. And it was all because the Count cleverly caught her and feared that the lady might get hurt. He asked Taylor to watch Brielle while he and Marie were alone for a while. The boy was very scared that his beloved nanny had fallen and didn't immediately understand why the Count appeared so unexpectedly. He saw them from the window and worried about the nanny when she climbed the tree. He didn't think the piece would break, and it seemed strong. The young man suggested that the children go together to see the new guest, because lunch would take place soon. After a while, the baby reached little Ellie. It seemed that he was very angry because Marie's birthday would be tomorrow, and he didn't know about it at all. Embarrassed, he asked the little one what gift she had prepared for her beloved sister. He was very upset because he didn't know about her birthday and hadn't prepared a gift. But Ellie confidently said that his sister would simply be happy, even if he just congratulated her. The baby started crying and worrying a lot because everyone knew about Marie's birthday. He only found out today. When the Count entered the room, he ran to him and asked threateningly if he knew that he should, that his beloved nanny's birthday was tomorrow. He smiled shyly and said that he would also really like to give her something. Marie woke up in the morning happy and excited because today was her special day. Her birthday, and her face lit up with a smile and her heart filled with joy and gratitude for everything that happened in her life. Marie went out with everyone in the common room. Little Ellie was the first to run to her and congratulate her on her birthday. Holding a huge box in her hands, she took a wonderful gift out of it and said that she and her uncle had been choosing it for a long time. It was a scented candle, and Brielle also decided to give the same one. Ellie said that the young master couldn't choose just one thing, so he just asked his uncle to buy everything. He gave his beloved nanny many scented candles, which she loved, and began to worry if she would have time to use them all before the end of her life. The young man also gave her a gift and said that last time the girl didn't wear a brooch, so accessories were probably not to her liking. This time, he gave her something special. The girl actually didn't know that it was the Count who was teasing her and laughed because he was simply afraid. Because the young gentleman might hurt himself with the jewelry. Kentrell asked if it turned out that she really liked the gift and the previous brooch. And the girl nodded happily. Little Ellie ran to her beloved sister and also asked to see her gift, that she had been choosing for a long time. Marie unpacked the gifts and was incredibly happy to be able to celebrate this special day for her with her beloved family. She thanked everyone for their care and attention, kissed the young master, and told him that the gift was the most special. In a past life, the parents did not get along. They had to marry Marie especially, so the girl didn't even remember the last time they congratulated her. For a long time, she tried to forget this day, because it seemed to her that it didn't belong to her at all. But today was truly special. And thanks to all these people, she wanted to remember it, because today each of them gave her a piece of their heart. And love. Ellie gave her sister a beautiful hat that matched her incredibly blue eyes. Marie, spinning around in front of the mirror with a happy face, told her sister that she was going to meet an important person. But the little one doubted that they wouldn't dress so beautifully just to meet a loved one. Recently, Marie was surprised thinking that when they caught the criminal, she felt better. And she realized that she hadn't been out in a long time. So, on this beautiful sunny day, she put aside all her work and with a calm soul went to meet a person whose name was Erin. Erin was Brielle's former nanny, and she was very happy to see the girl again, whom they hadn't seen for a long time. Next to her sat a boy, and Marie was surprised that during all this time he had already grown up incredibly. She said that the young master was doing well. Every day he looked more and more like a count. And the woman smiled, which meant that the young master would definitely become a handsome man. He asked if the girl looked incredibly stunning today, and if she really dressed up just for him. The lady sincerely said that this suit suited the girl very well, said Marie. The head maid said that she would take care of the gentleman, so she was free until the evening. And they could have dinner together. But suddenly, the girl turned around and saw a teacher sitting at the next table. In the same establishment where she met Erin. The young man was very surprised to see a familiar face here and greeted the lady. Marie said that Mr. Hugues was Brielle's teacher, and the woman was happy, which meant that they all worked in the same place. And they are good friends. The kind lady asked the young man to sit with them so that they could all enjoy their time together. The young gentleman approached little Ellie and asked where her beloved Marie had gone. The girl at that moment was reading an interesting book with fairy tales. She cheerfully reported that her sister had a date, but at that moment the count was behind her, who was so surprised that he even spat out the tea he had just swallowed. He did not expect to hear this at all, and for some reason, a strange and strong feeling of excitement invaded him. The young master was very nervous because his beloved Marie was now spending time with someone. So he started stomping hard and shouting where she had gone. But unfortunately, little Ellie didn't know exactly who her sister was going with or where she was going. The baby started shouting and crying a lot because he wanted Marie to be his only one. And he was sure that no one else dared to touch her without his permission, which was very typical of a child his age. At that moment, a knight approached the count and told him that he had finally found him. He said he found Marie near the market and that there were many knights in the area. So there was nothing to worry about. The knight also reported that there was a man next to her, and the count looked at him with astonished eyes. In fact, the girl was very difficult to find. The young man thought that the count should pay attention to this matter. The count was very upset that he couldn't control his emotions and considered it very ugly of him. He was sure that he should have actually congratulated the nanny if she had really met her great love. Otherwise, it would turn out that he could simply ignore her feelings. But for some reason at that moment, he felt very painful. He put his hand to his chest, his heart beat wildly. At that moment, he clearly realized that he did not want to lose the sweet Marie. And he didn't want to. But if the feelings were not mutual, he would have to take responsibility. And take this decisive step. If she really has a lover, he can in no way interfere with her happiness. At that moment, he looked out the window and saw Marie returning, and the lady looked incredibly happy and satisfied. Even in this short period of time, the children managed to miss their nanny, whom they had become so accustomed to. Brielle, angry, was the first to run to her and shout at her if she really had a date, and didn't tell her anything about it. She knelt down, took the baby by his little hands, and asked where he got this idea from. And who told him? She gently stroked his head and told him that she actually went to meet Aaron, and that the baby probably must have remembered her because she was his former nanny. The baby looked at her with wide eyes, and the lady said she would never have dared to leave him. She invited him to go together next time, and the young master was incredibly happy. He thought that Ellie would misunderstand her when she was spinning around in front of the mirror. And surely, the Count had already heard this information too. But for some reason after this, the Count began to behave strangely. And every time she approached him, he avoided the conversation. In extreme cases, it was really impossible to catch him, and he slipped past her like the wind. Little Ellie was sure that the Count was living his date, and on his birthday, he didn't take his eyes off his sister. Bari tried to convince his sister that she was too worried, and that the Count was simply kind to people. But little Ellie was sure that there was clearly something more than simple goodwill. He laughed, fell to the floor, and started shouting that the little one was teasing him. He was very scared. He said that he was also very scared because little Ellie told him about the criminal. She told him about that situation. And Barry said that if he were in her place, he would have been very scared, and he understood that little Ellie was definitely worried that day. But she was very happy that they had caught him and that they were no longer in danger. The boy thought for a moment, suddenly asked his sister what she thought about him staying here. Marie was on the porch of the mansion and enthusiastically looked at the beautiful nature surrounding her. She couldn't understand why the Count suddenly started ignoring her, and she only had one idea that he had heard about a date that didn't actually happen. These thoughts didn't leave her head and worried her a lot, and she decided that if she was so interested, she just needed to go and ask him personally. She worried that she might suddenly recount this misunderstanding, but it would actually turn out that the matter was different. She would feel very embarrassed because she might be wrong, and there was no point in telling such nonsense to a busy person. And it was quite disrespectful. At that moment, it seemed to her that someone was nearby, so Marie picked flowers and decided to return to the mansion without staying on the street for long. The girl took a basket of flowers, but her attention was also drawn to a small piece of crumpled white paper lying on the bench. She approached and examined it. It was a note that appeared out of nowhere, but the word written on it made her tremble and worry the girl with fear, and this word was traitor. The empty garden and the sudden note with the inscription traitor seemed very strange. Marie was sure she had identified all the dangerous people on the Count's estate. But this was her last warning. She understood that they could harm Brielle at any convenient moment, and if she continued in the same spirit, then you can really lose her. And despite the Count's distrust, she needed to tell the truth. The girl urgently ran to Kentrell's office to finally tell him everything. The Count seemed like he still didn't have the courage to meet the nanny, so he said that if the matter wasn't that important, then she could come next time, but judging by the expression on Marie's face, the matter was very urgent. The young man asked if the lady had any pain or if something had happened to the children. With trembling hands, she showed him the note and told him that someone had just dropped it on a garden bench. The word traitor was written on the note. The Count asked what it could mean, and Marie said that this word definitely related to her. It was completely incomprehensible to the Count, whom Marie could betray if it was him. Then it wouldn't make sense to leave her a note. And in this case, only one option remained, which was that the girl could probably be in cahoots with those who threatened the family crest. Marie suddenly asked if the young man had ever thought that she was acting strangely or suspicious. The Count was very attentive, especially to the young master, and must have felt how in an instant Marie seemed to turn into a different person. And all this happened in one day. She told the young man that this information was very important and asked him to think about his answer. That day, when Kentrell was looking for a suitable candidate for the nanny position, The butler provided him with Marie's resume. She had extensive experience working with children, so the Count hired the girl for the job without hesitation. He saw how Brielle couldn't stop crying, rejecting her, so the Count thought about his choice tens of times. But at one point, something really changed, and Brielle started smiling when she saw the nanny for the first time. Then Kentrell thought about her sudden change for the first time. From that moment on, there wasn't a day when Brielle didn't smile, and then he firmly decided that the problem really wasn't there anymore. And this girl was ideal for the role of the young master's nanny. He admitted that he really had those thoughts, but at that moment he thought he was wrong. And Marie looked at him and informed him that the story she wanted to tell now was completely true. The girl knew a lot of facts about the Count. She told him that, when he was young, he loved fishing with his older brother, and he did it only to be with him. And not for the love of fishing. When the Count ran away, as he simply didn't want to attend social events, his older brother scolded him. When his parents joked about changing the family crest, he decided to draw it himself. Marie knew all these facts from somewhere. She said she knew about Derek's subordinate, whom he could trust, and believed that the young man would listen to her. And believe her words. The Count said that the lady couldn't continue. The young man perfectly understood that no one knew about Derek except the butler. And Taylor. The story she told for hours in a trembling voice was incredible, and this world really turned out to be just the plot of books, where Marie was the main assassin hired to kill the young master. But someone else really possessed her one day. The young man excitedly asked why the real Marie wanted to kill Subriel, and who could entrust her with this cruel task. The nanny said that everything was explained after the incident, so she also didn't know the motives or the client's identity. But she knew that he appeared in the parallel story, but she couldn't explain to the Count that she hadn't read up to this point. The young man saw that the girl was very worried. He hugged her and told her to stop talking about all this. Marie looked at him with worried and tear-filled eyes. The young man tried to calm her down, because everything would be fine. The most important thing is that now Brielle and he are alive, and everything is fine for them. But the lady was very worried that the Count hated her, because she tried to kill him in the original story. He convinced her that she was not to blame for anything now, and in fact, it wasn't her. And everything would be wrong if she were still planning the assassination attempt and didn't tell him anything. The doubtful story seemed more like a lie, but the girl's tremors and sincere emotions proved that it was true. And yet the Count couldn't hate her. Her real name was Hyren, and the Count, wiping away her tears, said that it turned out she was a very sensitive girl. He suggested that, in addition to all the worries, the girl must also have felt very lonely. He asked her if she had a close relationship in her past life in the original story. The girl wondered if she had a close relationship with anyone, as her parents were always busy. And she didn't remember her friends either, since they never managed to see each other. The girl understood that if she met her friends, she would like to talk to them as if they had never parted. Before the accident, she and her mother wanted to go on a trip. She admitted that she missed everyone very much and cried bitterly, but the next moment Marie's head began to spin violently. And she lost consciousness, falling onto the Count's chest. 3 days had passed since this incident, and during all this time, little Ellie did not leave the bed with her sister, who was still unconscious. Her brother approached her and told her that it was time for the baby to rest and eat something. He offered to bring her something to eat so she could freshen up, and promised her that he would definitely go to bed today. In fact, little Ellie had already noticed some oddities in her sister, who was completely different before. The boy had become a brave man. He said that he didn't know how to play the piano, although he used to know how, and that the girl hadn't worn the brooch she received as a gift from a brave man for a long time. But from some moment, my sister started smiling every time she called her little Ellie by name, and addressed her. Once, Ellie asked her why her sister didn't wear that brooch, and she replied that the young master might get hurt by it. That time, the girl felt that her sister truly loved the young master. She admitted that she adored her, Bari, and little Brielle. But judging by their past relationship, Little Ellie was very afraid that everything her sister said was just another lie. In the past, the sister always said that the young master and she were just a way to make money. In difficult times, the lady always came home angry and said that she wouldn't live like this if things were different. And that's why, now little Ellie felt like her sister and was just pretending to be very happy. It seemed strange, but she remained a good and obedient little sister. Because she didn't want to be abandoned again and felt the pain and disappointment she felt. But her sister seemed too sincere, and it was hard to believe it was a lie. Because she looked at her sister with such warmth and amazement, and from that day on she never shouted at her again. So the little one couldn't believe that this girl was definitely her, past Marie. The baby suggested that Marie had actually already abandoned her, so the days passed. And years, and over time these things stopped mattering to her. But she understood that no matter who her sister was, she was her dear and dearest family. After fainting, Marie suddenly changed, and the girl was afraid to leave her alone forever. She sat near the bed and cried bitterly, begging her only sister not to leave her or leave her again. The Count saw that little Ellie was very worried about her sister and looked at her. He remembered the relationship with his brother. That afternoon, the Count received a message that his subordinate Derek had arrived. And he was waiting for him in the living room. He immediately felt a strange atmosphere in the mansion and asked what happened. The Count told him that Brielle's nanny suddenly fainted today. He gave the important news that he had almost finished his previous request. The Count warned in a whisper that we can no longer wait until the time comes. And the enemy shows his true face. That night, Taylor took the young master to see Marie, and the boy was worried that Marie might get sick because of him. He was very upset because exactly the same thing happened to his mom and dad. But Taylor tried to assure the baby that it wasn't his fault and Marie got sick. The young man told him that there are truly evil people, and the little gentleman is definitely not one of them. So he definitely has nothing to blame himself for. The young master listened carefully, and Taylor's words were sincere, so the little one quickly believed him. But it still seemed to him that the young man was lying, because his hands trembled a lot when he said that Marie was fine. He heard that in the mansion, they say there is a suspicious person following them. So everyone around him whispers and hides something from the young master. Even at such a young age, he really wanted to help everyone, but since he was just a little boy who could only play, no one involved him in adult matters. The baby sat near his crib and really wanted his beloved Marie to wake up again. He promised her that when she woke up, they would definitely go to Erin together, as she said. And then they would go with her Uncle Ellie and Bari to the market together. The boy asked Taylor if he could stay here a little longer, but he also understood that his nanny needed a break from everyone right now. Taylor took him in his arms and promised him that tomorrow they would come back to Marie. And now it was time for the young master to go to bed. The young man looked at Marie. He understood that if this continued, the young master would grow up too fast, and he really wanted the nanny to wake up as soon as possible. 5 days had passed since Marie lost consciousness, but one fine day the mansion was once again filled with ringing laughter. Marie finally regained consciousness, and the Count immediately reported that the young master had been looking for her for a long time. The lady went out for a walk in the courtyard, and the young man immediately worried that she still had very little strength, and that it was still dangerous to walk alone. She brought her face close to his and looked intently into his eyes, declaring that he needed to rest even more, because she had lost a lot of weight during her illness. She smiled very sweetly and said that the young Count had really been very worried about her the whole time. The young man said that he had really been thinking about her condition the whole time, and why she fainted after his explanations. The Count was sure that he didn't have time to tell her everything he wanted. Marie asked him what he meant then, and this atmosphere seemed very sincere to her. In the end, it turned out that the young man still thought that Marie had a date back then. But now she told him that she was going out with Erin and promised to show her to Brielle one last time. She said that the young master felt offended that day because she went to see Erin alone. And the Count was surprised to hear these words. The young man turned around and coughed embarrassedly, realizing that all his fears were in vain. He offered to send her a letter and carefully put a jacket on the girl, hearing her cough. The young man said that even during the day the patient might get cold, so the lady must watch her health. They remained silent for a while, looking at each other and feeling this moment they now share together. He said it was time for her to go to the young master, as he had been very worried the whole time, and very often went to his room with Taylor. The next day, an acquaintance of the Count approached him with his baby, who brought a special bag of sweets for the nanny. The boy wanted to thank the nanny for sewing a doll especially for him, and brought her a gift because they told him she was sick. Marie thought this act was very sweet, but the young master certainly didn't think so. He ran to his beloved nanny and invited her to eat pudding, declaring that he also had a gift for her. The nanny turned around and said that she seemed to have heard that the young master Jadon had a fight with Ciela again. The Count and his friend were talking in the courtyard. The young man asked him if he had heard rumors that Kentrell's residence was under special protection, and that something strange was probably happening. His friend was a male named Jake. Although he was an old friend and a strong ally who would always be on the Count's side, the young man was sure that he shouldn't have rushed into the fight. Kentrell didn't tell him anything. The young man just stated that if he needed urgent help, he should definitely tell him. The Count knew that Jake would take care of Brielle if there was any danger, and was always trustworthy. However, nothing was clear yet, and the Count first needed to find evidence. The circle was gradually narrowing, and everything started with those who benefited most from the death of his parents. That day, a special guest came to receive the king, whom he called to discuss an important matter. It was the king's and queen's father-in-law, a majestic man named Cabron, who politely greeted the king. He gave him the news that it seemed something had recently happened at the prime minister's mansion. The king smiled and said that he had already heard this news from someone. The king said, noticing the young man's excitement, he could assume that this was alarming news for him. And the man said that he simply wanted to protect his nephew's life. The king laughed and said that to preserve the throne, he sent his young nephew into true exile. He wanted the young man to realize his political weakness because he had even mentioned it out loud. The man, in turn, simply expected his support and knew that the king's actions could never be criticized. The queen, who was sitting nearby, asked if everything was fine with Kentrell. The king asked her not to pretend that she knew nothing, because she was moving away from him only to help her father. The lady wanted to say something else, but the king waved his hand, showing her that he was no longer going to listen to her words. He always neglected her opinion and didn't consider it important to at least listen to her. The king said it was time for his wife to leave, and the maids were upset because Her Highness had worked tirelessly for 2 weeks to come here. And in the end, it all ended so quickly. They realized that their queen was very upset and very worried about her condition. Bari was standing in the stables when he heard a familiar voice calling him. And it was his friend Sigmund. He told him that he had heard that the young man would return because of the incident with the Count, and that now he could safely return to the academy, but Bari said that none of that had happened, and that many things had simply happened to him. He said that he was completely safe now, but that at first he was very afraid to leave his sisters alone. A few days before Bari left, he had a conversation with the Count, who already knew that the boy had come to inform him that he was not going back to the academy. The young man perfectly understood that the boy was actually just worried about his dear sisters, and he really wanted to help them. He told him, or he is still just a child. Although Marie says he is fine, Bari is still worried. So he is thinking of staying here and taking care of the baby. The Count replied that Ellie might seem like a baby to him, but she is much stronger and more mature than he thinks. And maybe it would be better if Bari really stayed close to them, but if he went to the academy, instead of just being there, he could also protect them. Therefore, the Count insisted that the boy go to study, and he himself promised to take care of his dear sisters so that they would always be safe. He asked him not to worry and to concentrate on his studies, and he knew that would be the best option for him. Bari told Sieg that the Count insisted on going to the academy that day, and that his sisters really wanted him to finish it. So he was ready to go back. Still, he was worried that his sister wouldn't get better and would like the vacation to be longer. Sieg was the best student at the academy, so he could graduate earlier. But he didn't know what he would do if he graduated early. He said that now he was happy with everything, and it was difficult to think about finishing his studies and inheriting. And Bari told him that he thought the boy was a diligent student, but he knew he was a party animal. Bari promised him that this time he would pass and advance to the next grade. Sieg implied that the young man was indeed very sincere, but he didn't believe that he was completely satisfied with his abilities. At first, he thought the young man was a hardworking noble from an impoverished family. But in reality, everything turned out differently. If there is someone to protect, you will want to become stronger quickly for him anyway. And when Zeke suddenly visited his house, he felt envious. After the dismissal of Yugese's teacher, it was difficult to find a replacement for him. And a huge gap appeared in Brielle's knowledge. Marie tried to teach him to write on her own, but the lessons were very difficult for the young master. At the age of 4, Brielle was going through his biggest crisis, and all his activities seemed completely boring to him. The boy shouted that he wanted to play or play chess, but Marie insisted that he first promise to write 10 sentences for her. The children hadn't left the mansion for several months, but they absolutely had no time to be bored. After the lesson, Marie said that the children could go play and have fun among themselves in their free time. But Marie was beginning to worry about Ellie's education. It couldn't compare to the academy. But Ellie went to school with the neighborhood children. But everything changed after the Count announced the ban on leaving the mansion so that the children and Marie were safe. After finishing all the classes, the little one approached Marie and confidently declared that she wanted to be a teacher. Marie didn't understand what she meant at first, but the little one assured her that she had already decided on her future profession. She said that she had been thinking about this for a long time, and that her decision was not sudden or unexpected. She spent a lot of time with Brielle and decided that she really liked children. She loved them very much and was sure that she knew how they should be cared for. The little one watched her sister teach the young master how to write. And after that, her desire only increased. Ellie promised her sister that even if she had to study a lot, she would still manage. And she asked if Marie would be better off if she became a maid. She knew that they accepted girls her age as apprentices, so after training she could start working immediately and, in this case, Marie would have more money. But her sister insisted that she would be happy if little Ellie chose what she really liked. And the Count took care of them only because they were children. Their conversation was overheard by the Count, who at that moment arrived at the door, and said who advised them to worry about such trifles. He said he was surprised that there was still a light on somewhere. He came to check and warned Marie to lock the doors before everyone went to bed. He knelt in front of little Ellie and asked her a very important question. Kentrell promised that the girl could live here as long as she wanted, because she and Brielle were very good friends. Marie said that she convinced Ellie to become what she wanted, and that she wanted to work as a teacher, and the Count thought this idea was wonderful. Because little Ellie would be a wonderful teacher. And who else could cope with such an important and responsible job, if not such a kind person? And smart as she is. The Count promised that he would find a tutor for little Ellie, and Marie was very happy to hear his words. But the little one was very worried, because the gentleman had already helped them enough. But the young man insisted that the girl wanted to be a teacher. With full responsibility in her eyes, she told him that she would first like to try it herself to be sure of her knowledge and desires. The girl was very happy that the Count offered her his help, and she could turn to him at any time. Marie told the Count that she was surprised by her dream. To her, she was still a child, and it was very interesting when she matured so much that she started thinking about the future. The Count smiled and said that he also still considered Abril a baby, and it seemed like only yesterday that he ran away and didn't want to put a diaper on him. But his funny children have already grown up, Every day they become more mature and intelligent. The lady agreed with his opinion and looked down thoughtfully, realizing that her babies would soon become adults. The young man looked at Marie and sincerely thanked her for everything she had done for them, and said that the girl was very kind to them. Kentrell confidently stated that he would always do his best for his people, so Marie should not worry. And she could always safely accept his help. Suddenly, the young man asked if Marie had any old dreams she would like to fulfill. She said that before she wanted to take care of children, although she didn't get a job in a kindergarten. She was still raising children. In that life her dream came true, and then she came here. And now, she only wants the children to grow up healthy and safe. The Count was sure that the children were already growing up in care and affection, and he would do everything possible to ensure their complete safety. They said goodbye and wished each other good night, and the Count watched the girl for a few more minutes. And if she has a dream, whatever it is, he will want to stay by her side, no matter what. The next day, Marie left the mansion, thinking that Ellie and the young master were now in class. She perfectly understood that the children must have really wanted to leave the mansion and take a walk in this warm and snowy weather. Little Ellie was playing the role of teacher today, and the Count took great pleasure in helping her. While the young master was nervous that snow would soon fall while they were busy with this useless training. Marie came to check how her sister was doing. She checked their homework and said that one exercise was worth thinking about once more, and that when they finished, they could safely go play. The culprit has not yet been found, so the Count joined the children's education at home to help Marie cope with all her responsibilities. He said that little Ellie was managing well, that the girl was smart and determined. The young man asked if Marie was really worried about something, because she seemed a little concerned. He understood that for the safety of the children, the Count decided to teach them personally. But he thought he had overdone it a bit with the amount of material for the children. Together, they checked their completed homework and confidently declared that the children were free, and they could go play. Marie shouted to the children to bundle up, and Ellie made sure to put on gloves because it was snowing outside. The young man looked at Marie with concern and said that this was their first snowfall, and that they should probably also take a walk to feel all the magic of the snowy weather. Marie smiled and replied that it was a great idea and that they should also take a little break. The butler informed the Count that it was cold outside and asked him to wear the warm clothes he had brought especially for him. The young man picked up a warm coat and unhesitatingly put it on Marie, who was next to him. She asked him to put on the warm clothes himself, but the young man said that he didn't get sick as quickly as she did. Marie and the Count went outside and saw the children frolicking happily while walking and laughing heartily with joy. The girl looked at the snowy sky and felt that this was the first snow she had encountered here. She smiled and thought, as if it were yesterday that she held the young gentleman in her arms, when he didn't even know how to walk, and so much time had already passed. And now this little baby runs very fast and becomes more mature every day. And the Count, who seemed difficult, is now perceived completely differently. And they go through all the difficulties side by side. The girl felt that she was completely safe with the Count, and that he would not betray her in a difficult moment. Suddenly, the Count stopped her and said he wanted to tell her something. But suddenly, a snowball flew towards them, and the young man had to save Marie again. It turned out that the young man had already learned how to make snowballs and throw them in different directions. Little Ellie took him by the neck and told them to play among themselves and not interfere with the adults' conversation. The Count laughed and asked to finish talking later so that they could now enjoy this wonderful moment of the walk. Now they really had nowhere to rush, and the most important thing for them was health and the safety of the children. That night, Marie and the Count decided to please the children and prepared something special for them. The nanny told the children that they saw a structure for puppet shows in front of them, and the young gentleman looked forward with admiration. Suddenly, the Count, disguised as a fairy tale character, approached them and welcomed all the little guests to the puppet show. A little earlier, Marie and the Count were discussing how to diversify the free time of the children, who were constantly locked up in the mansion. The young man suggested that the children were probably tired of being locked up, so he decided to offer them a show right here. He said that at first he wanted to become a traveling musician, so he was familiar with many performances. And Marie thought that in the original he didn't appear often, so she didn't even know about it. In the end, it turned out that the Count knows how to play many musical instruments. He asked if Marie had said before that she couldn't play, but it was definitely a lie. And she said it all because of the expression on her face. She said that where she lived, musical instruments were much more accessible, and you could learn to play them simply by going to school. She promised to show the young man the music from her homeland next time, before which he definitely would not remain indifferent. The young man listened to her promise and would be very happy if the girl showed him her skill in playing musical instruments. The baby's puppet show had already begun, and little Ellie and Bari were sitting waiting for the show to start. The children were delighted with the start of the performance and the colorful cardboard toys. This performance was about a dragon, whose legend said that if you give it flowers, any wish will come true. The Count, who starred in this performance, managed to captivate the children and capture their attention. Several hours after the performance, the children finally got tired, and the young master fell asleep first. The butler took little Brielle to her room, and Taylor took Ellie to carry her and put her to bed. Marie was very happy that the Count managed to cope with the performance so successfully. And it was definitely an excellent job. She said that the young master seemed to really like the idea of dragons. And the young man said that it was very difficult to be a dragon anyway. The girl asked if there were really real dragons in this world, of which she had only heard in fairy tales. The lady began to talk about various legends with fabulous creatures. The young man laughed and did not understand what she was talking about, because in his past world everything was completely different. She promised that she would definitely tell all the legends in more detail later. But the Count asked her not to take away the toys left after the performance. He took one of the cardboard toys and said that there was still a very interesting show left. The Count said that he personally prepared it because he thought the girl was probably also bored in the mansion. His story was about a young knight who could not take his eyes off the beautiful face of a young lady. And for the first time in his life, the Count showed something like this, and the girl guessed that he was trying to recreate a short story from a popular love story. From the beginning, the lady had a smile of satisfaction on her face and tears of happiness appeared in her eyes. The young man told a story about how she doesn't even suspect how he changes just thanks to her. And only thanks to her did he begin to express his emotions more openly, but not just respect or banal sympathy. It was just a short performance, but for some reason, the lady felt very pleasant emotions. At the end of the performance, the knight finally confessed his love to the young lady. And after these words, the Count looked at Marie, who sat and watched his performance with surprise. The next moment, the girl's face changed, and large drops of tears ran down her cheeks. Marie understood that it was impossible not to love such a warm and sweet man, even apart from his status. He was too good for her, and she wondered if she could love him. It was a truly touching and sweet story, and the girl was very happy that the Count had prepared such a kind performance especially for her. She admitted that his speech and kind words even made her cry. She wondered while in Marie's body if she could make her future with Brielle happy and cheerful. That afternoon, the king was surprised that the prime minister himself came to meet him. He reported that his humble servant had arrived, and the king was surprised that he had finally arrived. He asked if the young man had been busy with personal problems during his vacation, and if they had been resolved. He gave him the necessary documents for his approval, and the king asked who had come with him. The Count said that the name of this young man was Vidal, that he was a commoner, and that he performed. The young man admitted that he did all the work himself, and the Count only approved the tasks performed. He left the documents on the table and said that since the Count had checked everything should probably be correct. The young man again asked the king to look at the documents, but he said that everything was in order. Maybe he hadn't appointed the wrong person for this position, and it was probably worth choosing someone else. The Count asked if he could adequately reward Whittle for a job well done. And in that case, he would like to grant him one of the titles. The king said that when he placed the Count by his side, there was a resonance in society. And yet he did not support him. And the Count replied that there were many rumors then. Now he is just trying to give talented people what they deserve. The king again asked if the young man was confident in granting a title to a common commoner. And current, the Count perfectly understood that royal power would always be unstable. Even when he was appointed prime minister, the aristocrats could not calm down for a long time. But above all, the king now needed talented people. Maybe this would not be an easy decision for him, but he would soon agree. And he won't have to worry when he's away from home, because he himself will need an effective forward. The Count asked for a title to be granted to him, and thus the king's power would become stronger. He said that the lowest title would be enough, and as long as it was not inherited, the aristocrats would not resist. After meeting with the king, the Count got into his carriage, where Derek was already waiting for him to tell him that everything was ready. He told him about the conversation with the king, who offered to think for a while. But the young man argued that he had no other way but to grant him the title and that he would not allow himself to waste such talent. Derek asked if Weddell was not the Count's man. He replied that even His Majesty believed that he was on his side. He knew that the king would soon announce a recruitment of new maids and servants. He asked Derek to prepare and send his people there. The Count implied that the queen had something to do with this and saw nothing wrong in suspecting her. Because, of course, she would have benefited from the death of her brother and her parents anyway. But it was not clear whether she was aiming at Brielle or whether she might hold a grudge against the Count's family. Or maybe she had something to do with her parents' adventure. The young man said that Derek should prepare a list of the families that were expelled during that case, and he asked him to locate them. The Count asked his partner to take care of himself and approach this important matter with caution. Marie met the Count after the meeting with the king and informed him that the young man was arriving quite late. She said that they asked her for help, and on the way back, she decided to wait for him. But her excuse sounded too strange, and the girl felt embarrassed for a moment. She still couldn't look him calmly in the eye after that puppet show, in which he clearly had a special meaning. Still, it was quite rude to constantly look away from him, so Marie composed herself and asked him if the Count was tired. Marie was not sure if she could make him happy, and assumed that the old Marie could ruin everything. The young man said that everything went as usual, and the girl thought that she should just not interfere. She had already told him everything. The Count would take care of the rest himself, and especially little Brill. The girl saw that after the conversation with the king, the young man had changed. And she stopped him, declaring that everything he said was false. She was sure that the young man was lying, because something happened between him and the king today. The lady was very worried about the Count and about Brielle because they had become very close and, even if they didn't have a future together, she still wanted them to be happy. She told the young man that his lies were also obvious and that it was very bad to hide them. Marie said that she told him everything so that he could also talk about all the difficulties that bother him. The Count sighed and replied that he would tell everything and wondered why the girl had such good intuition. He admitted that it was indeed a bit difficult for him today at the meeting with the king. But he knew that the girl was the one who had the most difficulty because she now fully knew his story. He said that he would be happy if the young man told him his difficulties, and that, even if they were small, he would always help him think about solving the problem. The girl suggested that he was imposing, but the Count replied that she should not think so, and that he didn't know what would have happened if she hadn't paid attention to his problems. He turned to Marie and told her that, in fact, he had something important to tell her. And the Count admitted that he suspected the queen and her uncle of the attacks. In the original, these two did not play an important role. The Count tried to contribute to the destruction of the palace, but it was not clear why they were targeting the young master. Marie asked if the Count had a reason to think so. He replied that it was these two who benefited from the death of his brother. his daughter-in-law and her parents. He spoke about what happened to his parents. It was a car crash. The same thing happened to his brother. He was falsely accused of corruption, and before they could withdraw the charges, an accident occurred. And after his death, part of the power passed to the queen's family. And after that, everything changed a lot. Marie understood that this was a struggle for power, and this was not new in history. So it was easy for her to understand all this. Perhaps Kentrel's uncle tried to seize Charant's power. And if so, then the king may also have something to do with this. Marie did not grow up in a particularly good family, but her relatives never threatened her if these conjectures are confirmed. Brielle will get an unpleasant surprise, and we can only hope that it is not her fault. He turned to Marie and told her with confidence that everything was fine, that she didn't have to worry, because he could definitely protect her and the children. The lady smiled and replied that the count himself probably needed to be protected. And protected. The next morning, the young master was looking for Marie to finally show her what he had drawn. The nanny looked closely at the drawing and praised the baby for his efforts. She took a letter out of her bag and said that the postman had recently visited them and brought them a letter. It was not in vain that Brielle became interested in writing, which she hated more than life itself after reading Barry's letters. He also wanted to write a letter to him himself. Everyone sat together on the sofa to read their brother's letter aloud, where he wrote that the semester was coming to an end, and he really hoped that everything was fine with his beloved family. In the letter, the brother wrote that if Marie forgets to eat again and faints again, he would be very angry if he found out. The child also remembered to ask how the young master was, and Barry knew very well that they were all reading this letter together now. He said that it was very hot where he lives last summer. There is a large tree next to the training ground, and he constantly rests in the shade of its foliage. It seemed that there were similar trees in the county, and probably the young master and Ellie were playing near them, and Barry found himself thinking that it was very inconvenient for him to write such letters every time. He promised to return in a semester, and was eternally grateful to the Count for everything he does for his family. And at the end of the letter, he wrote that he missed everyone very much, and was very eager to see them again as soon as possible. During the day, little Sally and Brielle were playing outside when the Count unexpectedly approached them. He turned to the children and told them that he wanted to introduce them to someone right now. A young man approached him, whom the Count called his most faithful person and called him Derek. He asked the children not to be afraid of a stranger in whom he had long trusted. And if something happens when he and Taylor are not present, Derek will definitely take care of them. The young master grabbed Marie by the skirt and asked her with tears in his eyes what was happening. Marie reassured the young knight and told him that one must always be prepared for unforeseen circumstances. And now he knows everything himself. Derek knelt in front of the young master and promised him that he would definitely take care of him, and that he could trust him. The child was very surprised when the young man called him master and looked at him closely. The Count said that the young master is now his successor, and it is right to call him that. Marie approached Derek and asked the young man to take care of the young master's safety, since she was very worried about him. The child was very surprised that the young man was very tall and his hands simply enormous. Marie knew that in the original it was he who was with the Count until the end, and he could protect the young master. At first, Derek seemed scary and rude, but Marie was glad to know that he was her loyal ally. The Count turned to the girl and asked her to leave for a while to talk alone. They entered his office, and the Count said that Derek had been working on a case the whole time, and that he was in Brielle's house. Marie asked how her grandfather was, and the Count reported that he was still healthy. She wondered if Brielle's mother had left anything and found her letters. He opened a wooden box with letters and said that he would like to read them with Marie, because he decided to share all the difficulties with her. He didn't have the courage to open it alone, so he called the girl to do it together. He was sure that Marie was very close to Brielle, and her mother wouldn't mind if she looked. And read the letters. The girl took out the first letter, which was written shortly before the young master was born. Its content was normal, and it was the first thank you for the birth of the young master. It was a story from the mother's point of view about why she decided to name her son that way. And the Count noted that the diary was very different from his brother's diary. It was a cheerful letter about how the child opened his eyes for the first time, hope for a healthy future. A list of gifts she wanted to give her son, words that I would like to live happily ever after with him. After reading the first lines, Marie became very emotional and began to cry. She read lines about a mother's love for her son and worried about not being good enough for the young master. After these lines, she stopped reading the letter. The Count tried to calm her down because she was doing an excellent job raising Brill. And there is no person on earth who is capable of taking good care of the young master like Marie does. The Count was also not sure how to cope with raising a child, and the girl said that the young man was also not ready for this. But he did his best to become the best uncle in the world for him. Kentrel was happy to hear these words, because he was very worried about not being able to give the baby everything he deserved. There was only one last letter left in the box, and surprisingly, it was intact. The Count suggested that it was most likely about Brielle too. Marie read the first lines and realized that this letter described Brielle's appearance with all the important points. But the girl was very surprised that the description was very different from how the real young knight looked. Marie noticed that the letter did not match the location of her birthmark, which the young knight had on his left leg since childhood, so she also remembered him by its strange shape. But the letter indicated his right leg. And Count B suggested that the last letter was most likely fake and that someone interfered with it. After reading these letters about the meeting with the Count, Marie could not sleep for a long time because she was too excited. Little Ellie approached her and excitedly asked what happened to her sister. Marie got up from the pillow, smiled, and told the baby that everything was fine. The girl said that in this case, she had a small request for her sister that she would like to tell her. She said she wanted to get some fresh air and take a walk with her sister. The girl said that her friend was going somewhere outside the capital, and she would like to say goodbye to her. Marie understood that Ellie had not left the estate for a long time and was happy to correspond with friends whom she would naturally contact. "I like to see." She said she would ask the Count for permission and ask the little one if she was interested in knowing why they were forbidden to leave the estate. The girl looked at her with fear and supposed that someone was chasing the Count. She thought that the culprit had already been caught, but since they were still locked up, it meant that something had not yet been resolved. Marie hugged her sister tightly and hugged her, realizing how scared the girl could be at that moment. But her little Ellie was already a full-fledged adult, and Marie felt it very well. She promised the baby that everything would be fine, and Ellie was very happy to have the opportunity to see her friend. The next day, Marie spoke with the Count and told him that Ellie would like to meet her friend, that she would be leaving soon, and the young man said that the girl's wish was quite understandable, because she couldn't even go to school. Marie reported that Ellie understood the seriousness of the situation and did not just give in to her wishes. The Count said that in this case, it would be worth allowing her to say goodbye to her friend and take Derek with her. Derek finally moved into the mansion and is ready to protect them at any time of the day or night. The Count fully trusted him and therefore could calmly send little Ellie with him. Marie was very happy and said that she would definitely tell Ellie this soon so that the baby would also be happy. Marie was sure that Derek was on the Count's side and that nothing should happen to her sister. The young man asked if Marie was tired here and that they could take a walk after he finished working. She asked him if he had any idea about the culprit and who wrote the last letter. He said that at almost the same time there was an accident, and there were rumors that a maid had disappeared from Brielle's house. He was not sure, but there was a possibility that she was involved in replacing the letters. Now all the knights are looking for her, and so far there is no news about her. The Count wished that Marie would not worry so much, and understood that if he made a mistake, he would be guilty of Brielle like no one else, but he was also glad to be able to share all these questions with Marie. Little Ellie quietly approached Derek, with whom she was going on a trip. The young man asked to call her by her name and little Ellie quickly remembered it the first time. She asked him if he could do something about those dark clothes, because they were scaring other people. The girl was very happy that the young man agreed and offered to show him how he should dress. They entered the store together. After a while, the young man came out in an attractive suit, and next to him walked little Ellie in a pale blue dress with flowers. Ellie announced loudly that after changing clothes, Derek looked like a very sweet uncle. And that now, all the girls would definitely pay attention to him. Ellie showed the place where they agreed to meet her friend, but the next moment, something strange happened. Derek told the girl that the meeting was most likely postponed, and that he didn't know it would happen so quickly. The young man asked Ellie to listen to him carefully, and like the three of them, hug him tightly so they could run together. He reminded her of the store where they bought clothes, behind which there was a door, from where the girl should run directly to the Count's estate. The girl understood his instructions, and the young man asked her not to worry about him. Derek knew that it was better to stay with the child, but there were too many enemies. And he was surprised that they sent so many mercenaries. A few minutes later, Derek hugged the baby tightly and began to run forward, counting to 3. He ran to a safe place and let go of little Ellie on the way. Derek, once again, reminded the girl of the plan they had agreed on and told her that he believed everything would turn out well for her. The girl understood that she had to do everything possible not to become a burden to Derek, for which she had to run quickly to the Count and urgently ask for help. But at that important moment, an unfamiliar voice was heard behind the baby's back, asking her to stop. She turned around and looked with frightened eyes at the man next to her and did not understand at all what to do now. The girl closed her eyes in fear, but when she opened them, she saw the familiar face of Master Yuges in front of her. Ellie was very happy. The teacher hugged her tightly and told her that they would talk later and that now they had to run. That afternoon, Marie was sitting near the bed of her beloved sister Ellie, who was unconscious after everything that happened. The girl was not injured, but Marie was very afraid that the incident had shocked her daughter's psyche too much. The Count tried to calm her down, but the girl was crying and was sure that it was all her fault, and only she had endangered her only sister. Marie was sure that the Count had nothing to do with it. It was she who accepted his offer. The girl cried a lot and was worried while the young man tried to calm her down, insisting that she herself did not do this. Derek hurt his hand in a fight with strangers, but it was not fatal. The young man greatly regretted not being able to protect little Ellie. The girl asked how the young master felt. The Count said that he had been crying a lot for a long time. The Count said that he was afraid that the young master would become dehydrated from this, so he asked Taylor to take care of him. After a thorough investigation, it turned out that the letter was fake. Her friend had fled this house a long time ago, and Ellie because of that, since she hadn't left for a long time. I didn't find out this news. Marie suggested that the criminals probably wanted to kidnap Ellie and then start threatening her. The girl thought about it. This meant that Bari was also in trouble now. She had to go home right now. Marie informed the Count that she should travel with her friend from the academy. She said that in this case, she would send guards on the day of her return. The young man said that, given the whole situation, Bari will have to take a day off for a while, which he really regrets. Marie left her sister's room and in the hallway saw Professor Yuges, who saved her baby. Marie said that everything was fine thanks to him, but due to the strong shock, the girl was still sleeping. The teacher said that he has a house in the center of the capital, so he noticed Ellie's arrival, because the Count's carriage attracts attention. In fact, he always looked forward to the moment when Marie finally got out of that carriage. The young man apologized and was afraid of overwhelming the girl, so he wanted to approach slowly. He said that he could take better care of Ellie and keep strange people away from her. But Marie thanked him for his concern. Marie was very emotional, but she was grateful that the teacher was there at the right time. The young man thanked the girl for her kind attitude and told her that he would be busy with work soon anyway, and he wouldn't be able to see her anymore, so he asked her to take care of herself until their next meeting. It was snowing heavily on that dark winter night, and Bari's friend said they should take a break. Due to the snowfall, the horses got tired quickly, and his friend was also very eager to arrive quickly. Bari noticed that his friend was injured and seemed to be getting worse, all because of what happened to them a few hours ago. In one of the recent battles, a very strange situation occurred. At one point, it seemed to Bari that his opponents did not want to kill them, but to capture them alive. In this battle, his friend was seriously injured, after which his opponents immediately fled. Their entire team remained intact, and it was all because they were the best knights in the academy. There were still too many opponents, and the boys had to be very careful and circumspect. At the moment when the opponents disappeared and the young men relaxed a little, the assassin, who was waiting for an opportune moment, attacked his friend. The young men managed to escape, and Sig blamed himself because he refused to accompany the count. And he was wrong. In fact, he was only worried about the count because he was too kind and even sent people on the road. There were rumors about the count that he was very cold and severe, but in reality, everything was different. And this man was always ready to help in difficult times. Sig asked if he had any idea why these people followed and attacked them. After a short passage, the young men had to go out on the road again to arrive before nightfall. The next morning, Marie heard the same precious news that her beloved brother had finally arrived. The girl rushed to hug him because the worst thing Marie feared was not seeing her brother. She hugged him and continued to ask him how he felt and if he had been injured on the way. His friend was held in the arms of other knights, and Barry said that he was very sick and that he needed to be examined urgently. Tears welled up in Marie's eyes. She realized that her journey had not gone entirely well, and that her brother was in danger. Marie took her brother to the room and asked him to remember to eat, while Taylor took care of his friend in the other room. The count said that he understood that the young man was probably tired after a long journey. But now he needed to tell everything that happened. Bari said that when they were almost there was another attack. The count said that his friend was recovering. The wound was not fatal, but he lost a lot of blood and fainted. Therefore, he will soon contact his family and report what happened to his son. Bari was sitting next to his sister's bed, and at that moment the little one woke up and called him by name. Marie was very eager for the girl to wake up. So the first thing she did was ask him how he felt. Her brother was very worried about everything that happened and believed that he had endangered his best friend. And he thought that he had lost his sister, and these thoughts made him unbearable. And after a while, Sieg woke up and didn't even immediately realize that he was in the count's mansion. Sieg regained consciousness a few days after Ellie woke up. The wounds took a month to heal completely. But now their lives are not in danger. The young man thanked his friend and his family for the care they provided him in this difficult situation. Marie brought him hot tea and told him that she would go with Ellie and then see the young master. Since he was nervous and fell asleep next to her, and Bari promised to take care of his friend. Bari was very worried about his friend and asked him to rest more and monitor his condition. He said that the count had sent a letter to his family and they would also be informed soon. Barry said that he got away with it and that his escort was also fine. They were very grateful to them for the fact that the young men did not run away, but bravely fought with them. Barry also said that he still doesn't know why they were attacked in that forest. Zeke looked out the window and thought the walls of his house also hid many secrets. So he understood that it would not be so easy to find everything out. The next day, Bari held a wooden sword in his hands and Marie, standing nearby. She was worried because it was probably too early for her brother to train. But Bari insisted that he felt fine and that there was no need to worry about him. The young man heard a familiar voice behind him, and it was Cheese Taylor, whom he was very happy to see. Zieg recognized this young man, who was the famous Sir Taylor. He entered the academy as a commoner and was often promoted early to the next class. So he became a genius known to many. Barry introduced Taylor to his best friend, whom they met at the academy. And they studied together. Under the leadership of the Count, Taylor conducted a small investigation. The Keeler family was a noble family living in a remote territory. They always remained neutral in the struggle for power. They had two sons. Sieg was the younger one, and the older one was the successor, so Sieg was not entrusted with important matters. He is known as a sincere person in the academy for how hard he fought. Taylor noted that Sieg really looks like a genius in this. It's a shame that he cannot show all his skills due to an injury. Taylor invited Bari to train with him to see how much he had grown, and he had become good at fighting. The child quickly agreed, and the young master was surprised at how great Brother Bari had become. The young man has not yet revealed all his skills and is much stronger in attack than in defense. Bari fought in a truly militant manner and repelled most of Taylor's attacks. The young man maintained the defense with confidence, and Taylor was even surprised by the skill with which he handled a sword. Once the match was over, Taylor noted that Bari had become incredibly good at it. And now it has become much more difficult to deal with him, thanks to his great successes in battle. The trailer was very happy that Bari lasted 10 minutes, which was very commendable. The young man jokingly asked if the young master would show his skills in battle. The child, most importantly, took a toy sword and began to wave it in different directions with shouts of joy. Zeke watched the Barry family from the other side and understood that such warm relationships were alien to his family. He saw the young master grow up in love and affection and would never have thought that he would envy the child. Suddenly, Ellie and Marie approached him, who thanked the young man for being with her brother all this time and helping him fight. The nanny smiled and said affectionately that she was incredibly happy that he saved her younger brother and came out unharmed. Sig remembered her look when he and Marie first met that day. She kept her distance from him, like everyone else in this mansion, and he knew it very well. Bari also kept his distance from him in the first few days, but suddenly they began to communicate. A good family, beauty and talent. That's why Sig was liked by everyone at the academy and communicated with many guys. In fact, everyone liked him, but he himself didn't even know if he wanted to be the center of attention or not. He was happy that since childhood everyone treated him well, but as he grew up, he realized that people were not interested in him, but only in his surname. But suddenly an exception appeared in his circle, and it was Bari who behaved differently from the others. And when Zig teased him, instead of smiling wryly, he got angry and scolded him for his mistakes. After talking with Bari, for the first time he felt that he had a real friend he could trust. He even became interested in getting to know his family better when he started talking about his sisters during the Sieg holidays. He even went with him to the county. And it was that day that something unpleasant happened. In this house, they were not kind to him then and feared a stranger who crossed the threshold of the mansion. But it was the first time he received words of gratitude as Sieg and not as Keeler. And they were really sincere. The Barry sisters were very kind to him, so the young man was incredibly grateful to them. And after that, he thought about the fact that he was actually more grateful for their sincerity than for their actions. Late at night, I met with Derek, who brought something that had fallen during the attack on Ellie. He expressed his opinion, implying that this was done intentionally, and in a case where it is difficult to recognize the client. They suddenly openly leave evidence of their guilt, which is very strange in itself. The next day, Ellie studied with the young master and showed him her drawings, which he had to guess. The young men sat with the children and wondered how these drawings could be called a dragonfly. Marie was also with them, laughing cheerfully with the children who were talking about the strangeness of the dragonfly. Sick suddenly said that he would like to squeeze the young master's cheeks, as he has no younger brothers or sisters. And he is seeing the child for the first time. The young man said that he was sure that his team would win and was very happy about it. The time has come for the wish for which the boys played to come true. And Sick asked what they and Bari could wish for. And a few minutes later, little Ellie and Brielle jumped on the boys, who promised to carry them on their backs. Sig thought it was just a cute wish, but in reality, he was very wrong when the young master asked him to run faster and faster. Little Ellie looked back and saw that the boys were catching up, and Bari was surprised if they were really catching up. They ran to the house that their uncle had built, and the young gentleman cheerfully told him about this place that he really liked. Sig noted that the Count was really a kind person, and Bari confirmed that society was very wrong about him. He saw the young knight, who was looking distractedly ahead, and caught the moment when his soft and tender cheeks could grab him. The child clearly did not like the fact that someone was touching his cheeks and immediately became nervous. The little knight pouted and fell silent, crossing his tiny hands in a very cute way. All these moments were very sweet, and Sig felt very good with his best friend's family. After a long walk, they all returned together to the mansion, where Marie was already waiting for them. Sig held the young master in his arms, who had been deeply asleep and snoring for a long time. Marie thanked the young man for taking care of the young master and bringing him with her. Ellie was very happy to see Derek again, whom she hadn't seen for a long time, because she had begged her sister to arrange a meeting for them. The young man gave little Ellie a beautiful mirror and said that in this way he expressed his gratitude to her. In fact, Ellie did not expect any reward, so she was very happy to see a nice surprise for her. The young man suddenly knelt down in front of the girl and asked her to forgive him for exposing her to such great danger too. He handed her another box and said that she should give it to the nanny, and he bought it along with her gift. The girl was surprised that Derek and Marie became so close that the young man even gave her a gift. Although the nanny didn't know it, it was a sincere gift and an apology from him for doubting her. The young man thought that if Marie were his enemy, his family would not have been clearly threatened. Something was wrong here, and the nanny was definitely not to blame for anything. Little Ellie suddenly announced that she wanted to learn self-defense so as not to endure any more if something like this happened again. The baby said that she only wanted to tell Derek about this and that she was not going to bother him anymore. Although Ellie didn't show it, what happened still surprised her, so the young man took her hand and told her that he wanted to show her something. But his task was still to run away as fast as possible. This morning Marie spent time in the library to choose a book she hadn't read yet. She suddenly remembered that day when she and the Count were standing in the same place. And suddenly an arrow flew by, shattering the window into pieces. The Count approached her and asked her what book she was looking for this time. The girl did not expect to see him here and even forgot which book she would like to read. She said that she could ask others to teach the children hieroglyphics and not waste her own time. The girl smiled and replied that she definitely could not entrust this to anyone else. She said she was looking for a book about noble families. She wanted to study the family tree and everything related to it, because the Count said that he suspected the Queen and her uncle. The girl was going to learn more about them, because her knowledge of the Count's world is quite limited. And the Count told Marie that he would like to talk about this. He showed her the medallion that was dropped during the attack on Ellie, and which was the emblem of the royal family. Due to doubts about the Queen, the Count sent his men to the palace, and Marie guessed that whoever planted the medallion did it intentionally. The young man recounted that when his uncle arrived there, all the servants were forced to keep silent. And it was from that moment that everything began. Kentrell said that apart from that there was nothing suspicious. In addition to all this, the Count learned about the Queen's personal life, although it was unpleasant. According to rumors, the king treats her only as a thing. At first, the king hated his uncle, and the world talked about the love of both his daughter and the king as something great. The young man assumed that their relationship was contradictory, but he had no idea that they would turn out to be so dangerous. Marie suggested that someone wants the Queen to be suspected in this matter, and that the Queen or her side should be the culprits. The Count apologized to Marie, and if those who attacked Barry had been caught, there would have been much more information. The sweet girl smiled and said that Kentrell already works very hard and is very tired. At that moment, the butler entered the library and announced that a new letter had arrived. He said that it was an invitation from the Queen's palace and that it seemed very strange to him. So there was such a rush to issue it. And the strangest thing was that the recipients were not the Count, but Madame Nanny Marie. The girl got scared. If I really committed some kind of crime, I don't know. But the young man replied that during his investigation, Marie had no record of committing any crime. So there is no need to worry about this. He said that this is an invitation to a ball that takes place every year, and this is an annual event. The Count did not attend such events, so he was sure that nothing bad would happen if Marie did not attend it either. Well, said Marie, if the Queen is related to inciting a secret murder, this ball will help uncover what is happening behind the scenes. Kentrell said that, if the girl had definitely decided to go to the ball, then she should tell them to teach her etiquette. He suddenly announced that it was time to give the girl a special gift, and hung a silver chain with precious stones around her neck. She said that she was not against jewelry, so the young man wanted to give her something that the girl would feel comfortable walking in. The next day, it was time to say goodbye to Sig, and the young master looked very sad to see him leave. The young man had really grown very fond of this little one in such a short time. And he said that, compared to living in his house for several years, he had much more fun living here for a few months. He promised to return, while the little knight watched him with big sincere eyes from which drops of tears flowed. They promised each other and Bari to meet at the Queen's ball, which would take place some time later. Bari told his friend that maybe he would take a gap year next semester. He told Sig that he would like to see him here again. His family would be very happy if he came to visit them again. After Sig left, the whole family came to the mansion, and everyone began to take care of their own business. Marie, suddenly and unexpectedly, reported that the idea struck her that something is valued more only when it is lost. The Count noted that Sig got along very well with the children, and if it weren't for the preparations for the ball, he would have stayed with them a little longer anyway. Marie sent several letters saying that Sig was injured here, but no one visited him. And that surprised her a little. She perfectly understood that often the second son enjoys less cordiality in the family and spends less time with him. The Count said that he was not interested in becoming the head of the family, so there were good relations between the elder brother. And there were never any special problems. The butler reported to the Count that the things he was talking about had just arrived. The young man noted that Marie will be at the ball for the first time, so she cannot use what she has on hand first, hinting that the girl urgently needs a new dress. The butler took the box to the room and handed it to Marie. The young man said to accept this gift. The Count said that he also had a new dress for Ellie, and Marie thanked him wholeheartedly for his concern and care. The Count said that his concern for his sister was commendable, but the lady should not be ashamed to enjoy his gifts to the fullest. The girl admitted that she had actually also prepared something for Kentrell. The next day, the cheerful young man looked for Marie in the palace to tell her that he had written a letter for the first time. The Count could not believe what Marie saw. He had thought about teaching Abril to write and read this way. He said that in the place where she grew up, children did this at least once. Marie showed everyone the box and said that it was called a time capsule, that they should all put letters here together. And things. Then bury the box and take it out after a while. She asked the children to write what they wanted to tell their future selves when they grew up. And they opened the box, which they could remember today. The young master approached Maria and asked her to put another thing that was very dear to her there. Maria asked if it wasn't a book that the young master really cherished. But the baby said that he was already big, so he didn't need to read fairy tales. The time capsule was a nice souvenir, but Marie was more interested in filling the children with expectations for the future. And she did all this so that they would not be afraid of tomorrow because of terrible incidents. The Count took the letter that Brielle had written and felt how important it was to the children. The young man thought that everything he gave to Marie was material, although she always says that they receive unnecessary care. But it is she, and not he, who shares the most valuable and intimate things with others. The next day, everyone started preparing for the ball, and everyone saw how fantastic Brother Bari's suit was. Marie also put on a new dress, and it was the first time everyone saw her looking so excellent. The butler wanted to help the lady get into the carriage, but the Count asked him to stop. He said that he himself would accompany the lady and help her into the carriage, and respectfully offered his hand to Marie. The girl sat comfortably in the carriage, where little Ellie was already waiting for her. And then her brother entered. The brother and sister noticed that Marie looks beautiful today, like a magical princess from a fairy tale. Before leaving, the Count opened the doors and told Marie they would see each other upon arrival, and that he himself would travel in another carriage. The carriage arrived at the place where the ball was to be held, and Marie asked little Ellie not to get nervous, and to do everything as they had taught her. Barry told his sister that if she were in a similar situation, she should remember to take care of herself first, and not put herself in danger trying to help others. The Count approached them and informed them that this was a royal palace, so that they would not be suddenly attacked. In any case, he would be watching them, and try to make them not worry and enjoy the ball. The Count, along with Marie, the young master, Ellie, and Barry, arrived at the ball and finally stepped out into society together. Many guests immediately approached the young man, wanting to pay attention to him and express their respect. Many began to whisper about the girl accompanying him, and some guests were sure she was the nanny of the Count's family. Brielle was seen by his acquaintance Jadon and was very happy that he would also be at this ball, and he would have someone to play with. One of the children said that his parents were now in the other direction and wanted to offer him something, but he was interrupted by a little girl. This girl was Jadon's younger sister, whose name was Ciela. She walked towards them indignantly, with loud shouts that her brother had left alone again, and didn't call her. Little Jadon introduced Count Charant and the younger Count and asked his sister to greet them. Following the children, his friend approached him and told him that since he had seen the Count on this floor, then the sun would surely rise in the west. It was Viscount Jake, next to whom was the same assistant Whittle, whom the Count had proposed to the king. And the young man said that this guy was doing a good job, and therefore he would have to try even harder. Whittle bowed and said he was very happy to see the Prime Minister, and he wanted to meet him personally to convey his gratitude, thanks to whom he received such a high position and title. Suddenly, Marie looked to the other side and saw a familiar face, and it was again Brielle's teacher. She turned around and saw Marie, and immediately recognized that it was Madame Nanny. The young man immediately approached his good friend and asked how she was. Euches politely said that Marie looks very well today and seems to be radiant with happiness. Marie said she didn't think she looked like she was in a place like this. Thanks to the Queen's invitation, she was enjoying a luxurious life, even wearing such a beautiful dress. She supposed the Queen would like to see the young master at least once, and that's why she allowed him, as his nanny, to be present here with him. The teacher said that this was something very common, and that the Queen loved children very much. Well, she wanted to talk to Marie about something more abstract, so she decided to invite the children for a delicious refreshment. Marie smiled and thought that even after that incident, the teacher was still very friendly. The teacher asked where the Count was. She said he had gone for a while to talk to his friend about a very important matter. The teacher wanted to take advantage of the moment while Marie was alone, but she didn't have time, because after a couple of minutes, the Count and the young gentleman were already heading in their direction. The Count said it would start soon, and that Mar should go in with him. The teacher watched Marie leave with the Count and sadly wished her to have fun. At that moment, Barry met Jadon's younger sister, who was very similar to him. At that moment, Sig approached them and told Barry that he had been looking for him for a long time, and that he was very happy to meet him. He asked Jadon's sister to play, while he went to talk to his best friend, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. The baby was very upset, and Marie asked Barry not to go too far. Sig started joking that the young man had become quite popular, and asked him to stop making fun of his best friend. He said he had come to inform him that he had also decided to take a gap year soon. Barry was very surprised that his friend decided to do such a thing. He stated that he was simply bored and needed a rest. All this time, another young man was watching Barry and his best friend, who had a special relationship with them. Barry asked if it was really about his family, and Shiga said he agreed, but that he was sure they didn't look alike at all. As the second son, he could become an obstacle for his older brother to become the head of the family if he graduated early from university. Marie noticed that Sieg was approaching the age when the original story was about to begin. But the next second the girl held her breath because she heard the announcement that His Highness and the Queen were leaving. The king came out and announced loudly that he was very happy to see everyone and thanked the guests for visiting, because their public state affairs always bring them great help. The count told Marie that the queen dresses modestly so as not to attract the attention of others. So there is no need to worry about this. Marie understood that the queen couldn't even wear the dress she wanted at the ball. That she herself envied because she was trying to match someone else's preferences. The young master stood up and looked with admiration at the queen, who was incredibly beautiful. Marie felt a strange and uncomfortable sensation here, and the king wished everyone a lot of fun at this ball. The king approached the count and asked if Marie was really the count's family nanny who was raising the young master. He said he called her because he wanted to see her sweet face at least once. The lady greeted the king and told him her name was Marie, and that she was indeed the young master's nanny. The king asked what family she was from. The lady replied that her surname was Fiora. The king replied that he remembered because the tenure of the office was ordered there, thanks to the condition of getting rid of the bonds that belonged to the head of the family. He turned to Marie and told her that he had called her for only one reason, and that he actually just wanted to thank her for taking care of his lifelong beloved nephew with the utmost sincerity. The girl really thought the queen had invited her, but the king said this bothered him a little. Although the organizer of this evening was the queen, but he also invited her. The queen intervened in the conversation and asked the king to allow her to greet the young master's nanny as well. She smiled and looked at little Ellie and happily said that this pink dress suited her great. Little Ellie was very worried and barely uttered words of thanks to the honorary queen. The queen introduced herself as Kentrell's cousin and said she was happy to see the young duke again. The king wanted to offer to call his subject to accompany the guests, but the count refused his offer and said that the king would probably be busy greeting other guests, so he could accompany his people himself. The king smiled and did not answer him, noticing how nervous the count became when communicating with him. The count said it was time to say goodbye, but one of the queen's maids called Madame Marie. She said the queen wanted to meet her in the garden, and the young man said Marie should probably refuse, and let her tell the queen that she wasn't feeling well. Well, Marie told him that everything would be fine, that the queen couldn't harm her in any way. She said she trusted her. She promised to be in a visible place so that the count would not worry too much about her. The queen's maid accompanied Marie to the place where Her Majesty was already waiting for her guest. The queen asked the girl to come closer and looked at her attentively and silently. She said she was curious to meet the man whom His Majesty had personally invited. She said she considered the girl the king's mistress, which is why he invited her personally. And Marie was very surprised and replied that she could not imagine such a thing. The queen noticed that this means Marie is the person whom Kentrell carefully values. And now she understands that the girl is truly worthy of this care, and it turns out that she didn't even receive half of the interest she receives. Marie understood, as expected, that the queen was not the type of person who would kill Abriel and, in reality, she just wanted attention and care from the king. After meeting the queen, Marie wondered if she hadn't hired her to kill Abriel. So, who could have done it? Ono accidentally ran into Sig and his brother, who had just had a conflict between them. The older brother asked him to behave as a second son should, and not to dare to aspire to the position of head of the family. The girl noticed that it seemed Sig had a very bad relationship with his older brother. And in the original, it seemed that the main character had no brother. The girl supposed that in the original Sig was already the head of the family, and did not understand how he inherited this place. The count saw that Marie was excited about something and asked her what was wrong. The girl was worried that something had happened before the romance began. But the young man tried to convince her that she was worrying too much about everything in the world. A few days later, Marie finally kept her promise and played the piano for the count. After listening to her, he said that she played very well. It was the first time in his life he had heard a melody of this style, and it was very entertaining. He was surprised by the use of the staccato technique and found it very original. The young man said that Marie kept her word about the performance and indeed played a musical instrument for him. In return, he promised her that next time he would play his famous songs. The girl asked if his older brother was alive, and he, as the second son, would not have received the position of head of the family. In that case, he would have become a wandering musician. She wondered if he would have been a traveling musician, not the head of the family. If they hadn't met under such circumstances, could she afford to desire this man? The young man complained that he had been telling her a lot since he decided to be honest. But the lady was sure that he hadn't actually told her even half. She told him that she saw Sig arguing with his older brother at the ball. But in the book she had already read, Sig was already the head of the family, and the beginning of that story was surely approaching. That's why Marie said she was worried that something might happen soon. And the Count suggested, he said, that after Brielle's death he got angry and became a villain. And if he competed with Zeke, and maybe there was some kind of connection between them from the beginning. At that moment, a young gentleman ran into the room, who was very eager to see his uncle. He was very interested in the question of what dolphins were really like and argued with Ellie about it. But suddenly, the children overheard a conversation about how to see a dolphin. You have to go to the sea. And the Count promised to take them there. Little Ellie didn't believe what Kentrell said at first, but he confirmed once again that he would definitely take them to the sea. She asked what Marie thought about this, who was nearby at that moment. And the girl said she was happy with everything, because they would all be together and share these moments of joy. Marie suggested that this idea could undoubtedly be an exciting excursion that all the children would surely enjoy. That night, she understood that the situation was very confusing, and she was very worried because she still hadn't been able to catch the real criminal. In the end, it turned out that the Queen was definitely not a criminal, but as far as the King was concerned, he played the role of a suspect. If the King were truly a criminal, he would have ordered the death not only of Brielle, but of the entire Charente County. Suddenly, Marie saw that the time capsule they had just buried appeared in the courtyard. Because it was raining, and the lady went to see if it was worth burying it deeper. But it turned out that it was not the same time capsule, but a box containing a letter. The letter said that the content of the conversation requires caution, so the person who wrote the letter wanted to meet in person. But this lady had to urgently leave her place, so she decided to leave this letter. And she really hoped that the person she wanted to give it to would not be angry and would tell her the whole truth. Kentrell informed her that he learned that his mother, the Countess, exchanged letters with his daughter-in-law. But this has now been confirmed. Marie wondered why she hid the letter in a wooden box under a tree. The young man said that over time, the box got buried between the grass and the earth. But thanks to the heavy rains, it came out again, and surprisingly, the letter inside the box was still sound and safe. The lady asked what her mother was asking, and the young man told his daughter-in-law that there was a family secret. There was a possibility that the bride's letter had been altered, so he wanted to send people to Brielle's maternal relatives to verify the information he needed. She asked if she could say anything more now, and if Marie had time to listen to him. The girl said she would be delighted to talk to him. The young man thanked her very much for always trusting and waiting for him. He warned her that next time she shouldn't go out into the street in such a heavy downpour. But people said they were afraid the time capsule would be carried away by the water. But the young man believed it was better to use her help. He admitted that he was very worried that she would get wet in the rain, catch a cold, and get sick again. The next morning, the gentleman came looking for Marie again, who, in his opinion, had disappeared somewhere. He saw the Count and cheerfully shouted that Jadon would arrive soon. He wanted to ask Marie to bake a chocolate cake. He saw in his hands a wooden board on which paints were mixed and asked if his uncle was really painting. The young man smiled and said that Brielle could look here since he had already come. Anne was interested. The young gentleman walked near the paintings, in one of which he saw the familiar face of his beloved nanny Marie. The uncle said he was painting this picture to give it to the girl on her next birthday. The child was very surprised to see how his uncle is really the best and makes incredible drawings. The young man remembered that recently the young master was very jealous of Marie because of Taylor, and decided to be the first to ask her if she liked this girl. The child looked at him with serious eyes and confidently declared that Marie was his favorite nanny. She was part of his precious family. He loved her as much as he loved his own uncle. He looked at the painting carefully and said that Marie in the painting was so beautiful, so he thought that Marie also liked his uncle. He patted the young gentleman on the head, who laughed cheerfully, and was very happy that everyone liked Marie. The next day was very warm and sunny, so the girl went out with her sister and her brother to help the maids with the laundry. One of the maids said that the lady could leave the laundry to them, but Marie was sure that they could easily do it themselves, so as not to be an extra burden. But the maid insisted that they entrust this matter to them today, since the lady seemed tired, and Ellie should play more at that age. After much persuasion, Marie finally agreed to entrust the laundry tasks to the maids and rest herself. Suddenly, she heard the maid say that a young lady from the Viscount's family had arrived at the Count's house today, and they were surprised because he never allowed girls to approach him. Little Ellie approached the Count, and he told her that he was only looking for his sister. Little Ellie was very surprised to see another girl next to the Count and immediately asked who she was. Marie sat alone in her room and thought about what she had just heard from the maids. She saw a beautiful girl with the Count, who was very suitable for his lordship, and they also had a close relationship. And the girl assumed that Kentrell started dating someone. Suddenly, someone knocked hard on her door, and the lady wondered who could come to her at that moment. She realized it was the Count, and it seemed to her that now it would probably be difficult for her to hide her emotions in front of His Excellency. She said she was busy at the moment and promised to visit him herself a little later. The young man knocked on the door again, and today he felt like talking to Marie. Through the closed door, he announced that the person he was with in the garden today was Viscount Jake's wife. He perfectly understood that the lady was probably jealous, so he told her everything even before she opened the door for him. She opened the door and with an excited voice asked his forgiveness for being jealous of an unknown girl. The young man unexpectedly told her to call him by his name and not by his status. Marie was very surprised to hear the Count ask to be called by his name, and at first she felt quite uncomfortable. It was clear that the girl was very embarrassed, so the Count did not insist on it. He said why he called the Viscountess he saw today. In fact, it turned out that she was close to his sister-in-law, so the Count decided to meet her. The two often exchanged letters, so they could find out if the daughter-in-law really wrote that letter in the wooden box. In fact, these letters were written in the bride's handwriting, but in the letter where she incorrectly indicated the location of Brielle's birthmark. The handwriting was slightly different. Marie suggested that it was likely that someone had forged this letter on purpose. The young man agreed with her opinion, and moreover it seemed to him that the letter was completely fake. However, if someone was so passionately trying to hide a certain secret, not even Brielle's maternal grandfather would tell him so easily. He thought about visiting his grandfather in person, but he hadn't made a final decision yet. So Marie had no reason to worry, so she decided to meet the young guest and slowly discuss the topic. Marie was greeted by Jake's wife herself, whom the Count invited as a guest. The girl smiled and said that she had wanted to meet the Count's nanny for a long time, and Marie politely greeted her. Jadon stood next to his mother, and the lady said that this time she had prepared something for the nanny. The nanny said that, by the way, she had prepared a chocolate cake for them, and it turned out to be Jadon's favorite dessert. That night, the maids whispered that they probably hadn't understood the good man correctly. And the Count didn't bring the girl to his house, he just brought a friend to visit. Marie didn't even have anything to justify herself with if she had made sure that His Excellency didn't react so sharply to this situation. But the next second something she didn't expect happened, and the maid, who was carrying boiling water behind Marie, threw it directly towards the girl. The young man shouted loudly, not having time to understand what was happening. The girl opened her eyes and saw the Count in front of her, who offered his back to protect the lady from the boiling water. The maids ran to them to make sure everything was fine with the Count, and that no one was injured. The young man said he was completely fine. The boiling water did not fall on his face, but only on his neck and back. The water was very hot, so the young man suffered burns on his body. But he still asked the lady not to worry, and that it would be better for him if she brought him an ointment. It was a minor incident for him, and he was sure that he barely felt any pain. The lady understood that this was the second time his lordship had been injured while trying to protect her. And she really didn't want him to pretend that everything was fine. The girl said she was not at all happy with how the young man was suffering, simply because he was trying to protect her from any bad situation. But the young man was sure that he could have been hurt countless times, but not let the girl get hurt or injured. The young man had told himself more than once that he would rather lend his shoulder than allow something to happen to Marie. That day, Marie walked with the Viscountess, who was worried that Jadon might bother his lordship. But the lady assured her that Brielle would be afraid to visit the sick alone. She approached the child and told him important words that everything would be fine, since Kentril was a very strong person. The young man was lying in his bed, and the young master and his friend came to see him because they were very worried. The young man assured them that he was really fine, and the nanny was worried in vain. His injury was not that serious, so he didn't understand why she was so angry. The young gentleman believed that everything would be fine with him soon, and thought it would be better for him to suffer and not everyone else, so that no one would feel pain. Marie also did not want him to suffer because of her, and wanted the Count to get better soon. Not only his grandparents, but also his parents died in an accident, a car accident. But only one child survived. The young master began to say that he would be very sad if his uncle suffered because of him. But the Count was sure that the young gentleman had nothing to do with it. And he shouldn't shed tears now. He hugged the baby tightly and apologized for worrying him. He promised to recover as soon as possible and be healthy and strong and never get sick again, so that the baby wouldn't worry. That afternoon, Marie was treating the Count's burns and was in a very depressed state. She treated the wounds silently and said it was time to leave, but the young man took her hand and stopped her. He said he wasn't hurt because of her and had no intention of causing her any trouble. "Mom," he admitted that he couldn't stand seeing her suffer, but the lady also didn't want to see him hurt. But whether now or last time, she couldn't prevent these situations in any way. And she was very worried that he might suffer more because of her next time. The most important thing is that she herself was not injured, and her wounds will heal very quickly. But that night not everything went so well in the mansion, and the first drops of blood had already spilled on the floor. The maid brought the master the tea he always asked for, but that night she saw a terrifying sight in front of her. Shortly before this, Jadon and Bari were playing together, and one of the children promised that next time he would definitely come to visit the other. Jadon said there was nothing to do, and that next time he would definitely come back with the young master. Because they are true friends. Jadon's little sister couldn't take her eyes off Bari, whom she liked very much. She asked if she could also come next time to see the most handsome young man in the world again. Her mother replied that she would be very happy to see them again and would love for them to visit more often. The young man said that the Viscountess was probably exhausted on the way here, and that she is already doing enough for her family. He reminded the Count that he had recently asked her about an important detail. She laughed and said that she also knew little about the family of the former Countess, and asked for forgiveness. She was close to Ira, but it turned out she had a secret she couldn't share even with her. And Marie wondered if she hid this secret so much, then it could also bring trouble to the Viscountess. The Count said that he had no serious injuries, that his burns would disappear very soon, and that he would be fine. The wound was not the simplest, but it was in the process of recovery, and in a few days he would feel much better. He said that there is a person by his side who is actively taking care of him, so there will not even be scars on his body after recovery. He went all the way, and Kentrell told Marie that he would recover soon without any problems. He is recovering faster than expected, all thanks to her applying the ointment every day. He told the girl that due to his injury, he needed to rest, so he planned to take a break from the Prime Minister's work for a while. As he needs to find the criminal targeting Abril, he needs to visit his maternal relatives and, while growing up, the Count wants to be close to him as often as possible. The girl said she was always happy to see him in the mansion, and the Count felt her concern. The next day, an emergency message spread throughout the city, and newspaper headlines were filled with terrible news. The newspapers surprisingly wrote that the suspect in such a brutal murder was the second son of the family. And just that day, the Count was going to leave and return as soon as possible, while Derek and Taylor had to defend the mansion. But the Count was stopped by his butler, who brought a new newspaper that spoke of a terrible situation that happened in one of the famous families. The young man held a newspaper in his hands and confidently announced that the Count would have to postpone today's trip. The newspapers wrote that there was an incident of parental murder in the kingdom. And it was a noble family. The head of the family and his wife were brutally murdered. It turned out that the main suspect was Sig Kaler, who had recently been to their mansion. The girl believed that this could not happen. And in the original, Sig's parents were alive, she thought. Probably everything happened thanks to her because she saved Abril. Everything instantly began to change in the lives of many people she was connected to. And even the fate of the main character must now change, and Marie understood that she was just a small link in this huge chain of consequences, and changed lives of people from whom she had to learn many new things.